Good evening, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board meeting. This is a regular meeting. Today is March 24th, 2015. The time is 5:07, and we'd like to ask you to please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We have a real treat tonight. Dr. Sammy Brower is here to direct the Coronado Advanced Choral Ensemble in the national anthem. So I guess we need to rise again. Thanks.
We would like to thank the Arcadia Advanced Choral Ensemble. We have a certificate, Dr. Annalie Fortis, or Coronado.
Coronado.
It's been one of those days. Sorry, Coronado. We have a certificate for the ensemble, and what a great way to have our new boardroom.
Here's our certificate.
Andy's got it.
Okay. Thank you so much. What a wonderful way to welcome everybody and to celebrate the first time in our wonderful new facility here. We'd like to thank the facilities department for getting this all arranged for us, and thank you for your patience while we figure out the new systems as we go along. At this time, can I have a roll call of board members? Let's begin with Mrs. Hartman, who is with us telephonically today. Mrs. Hartman?
Kim Hartman, thank you.
Pam Kirby. Barbara Perleberg.
George Jackson.
And Bonnie Sneed. All members are present this evening. Next on the item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'd like to make motion for a couple of revisions. I would like to move information discussion item 9D, budget update, up to in front of item 9A, so that will be the first item for information discussion. And I'd also like to move action item 10A to up to the information discussion section, so that it will now become item 9E.
I'll second that.
Oh, we'll do that first. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 And that motion passes 5-0. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is students and staff recognition and celebrations. Dr. Peterson. What? Oh. Okay. So we need to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
And I will second. And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so that also passes. Thank you, Sandra. The next item on the agenda is item 5, students and staff recognition and celebrations.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and our public. Welcome to our new boardroom that's being hosted here at Coronado High School, and we thank Coronado High School also for co-locating with us in this facility. You may recognize the dais in front of you is our old dais that we brought over. We refurbished it, and our building services folks did a great job. Also coming in, you may have noticed some robots that are out on the table. There's a display here, and we're proud to have our Mojave Middle School robotics teams here because they have done an incredible job, and you'll hear about that in just a few minutes. First, we have Dr. Melissa Sakos, who will recognize the Mojave Middle School for earning the Silver PBIS Arizona Achievement Award for demonstrating high-fidelity PBIS implementation and student outcomes.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson and Sandra. Yes, they did it again. We are so proud of Mojave Middle School for their continued efforts and proven fidelity and results in PBIS. Back in last month, there was a conference called BETSI, which is the Behavior, Education, and Technology Conference, and they were recognized for their successful implementation of PBIS. Of course, positive behavior interventions and support, and the criteria is based on research-based fidelity, evaluation, and measurable student outcomes. Mojave Middle School entered the Silver Award for this year's PBIS Achievement Awards, and they earned that award. It's important to note that next year they will be eligible for a Gold. You have to have implemented PBIS for a certain number of years before you can reach Gold status. So tonight I stand before you to recognize a Silver Award, and mark my words, I will be back this year at this time to be recognizing a Gold Award. The work, you know, cannot be done without exceptional leadership, so I have Mr. Rasmussen here, and I want to make sure we recognize him, as well as Susan Spickler, who is the PBIS team lead at Mojave's campus. So I want to say thank you, and would you like to say anything?
We're just very excited that we get to continue doing PBIS at our school, and we appreciate the support of the board and our community in that endeavor that we have. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson and Ms. Como, I just want to really highlight that it takes the entire school to do this. It is teachers that lead our campus and teaching all of our students every day the expectations and then rewarding those students that are meeting those expectations. So this is a school-wide effort under the direction of many, many teachers, and every day it's just something that it's awesome to see how teachers come together to lead the school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And while Dr. Sakos is up here, Dr. Sakos will recognize Mr. Richard Maxwell. He's our Arcadia Contemporary Music and Sound, or CMAS teacher. He was selected as one of 10 finalists for the Music Educator Award, which was presented by the Recording Academy and the Grammy Foundation.
All right. Good evening again. So it was last March 2014, that I stood before you and announced that Mr. Maxwell, who is our CMAS teacher at Arcadia, was one of the selected candidates for the Grammys specific to contemporary music and arts at the high school level. So he was selected as one of the final candidates out of 8,000 applications. So throughout the year, Dr. Peterson gave you updates, and he was at the 8,000 narrowed down to 2,500, and I think the next time we talked about it, it was down to 1,000. Well, top 10, and you cannot beat top 10. So again, this will not only recognize all of the hard work that Mr. Maxwell has put into the CMAS program at Arcadia. He will be awarded with $1,000, and also $1,000 in a matching grant will go to his program at Arcadia High School. So get up here, Max.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. The truth is that the program CMAS is unique, to say the least, and I didn't quite even realize that until we had gone through this whole process. In fact, it was interesting, just real quick, as we were going through the process and they're asking you questions and how does this work and how does that work, we started to find out that we didn't fit into the expected categories or configurations at all, and it was really quite wonderful. A lot of you, your attention here tonight over the year, Dr. Peterson graciously helped, and so did Dr. Sakos, with some videos that I am confident helped us a lot with it. And we're actually sort of analogous to a moth to a flame, I suppose. We're going to do this again next year, so that process is starting up just again. I also wanted to thank Nathan Slater, who's in the back, our new principal, who actually there's so much confusion sometimes about what the program is, how it started, what it does, how it works, and everything else. Mr. Slater is wonderful for a lot of reasons, but I think using the phrase "into sports" with Mr. Slater is probably not an understatement at all. No one would be surprised to hear me say that. He also, within about 30 seconds of walking into the classroom, looked around and you could just tell, got it. And it was this wonderful proof of concept moment for me earlier this year, and I just really, really appreciate that. I wanted to publicly thank him for that. And then the last thing I wanted to tell you all about is to invite you and anyone else. The Recording Academy and the Grammy Foundation are sending several folks, and I can't tell you who yet, but they are sending several people to our May 15th concert at Arcadia. It's in the evening of May 15th to do the more formal presentation, and you are all certainly welcome. It's a great event. It features what this is all really about, which is our students creating all kinds of original music and presenting it to the public. So that's that Friday evening, and it should be wonderful fun. And I really appreciate this recognition from you. For me personally, it means a lot to be able to have this program and to work in a place where we can have a program like this, because it is rare, and I thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Next, we have our Mojave and our other competitors for the VEX State Championships. Dr. Mitch Von Echten will recognize 5 SUSD robotics teams who competed in the 2015 VEX and VEX IQ State Championships at Arizona State University on February 28th. And after the recognition, Mojave Middle School has a demonstration to share with us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson. Madam President and board members, it's my pleasure to have got several announcements to make tonight in terms of our students. First of all, if I could have the 3 Mojave teams, and then we've got 2 Hohokam teams, come on up here and stand in front of our crowd for us this evening. If you could just get yourselves lined up here. Right up in here, you guys. The 2015 VEX IQ Robotics State Championships and the VEX Robotics State Championship were held in February at Arizona State University. SUSD was fortunate to have 5 total teams participate, 2 teams from Hohokam Traditional School and 3 teams from Mojave Middle School. Those students right before us. Coach Bert Taveldi and many parent volunteers helped lead Mojave's 3 teams to the state championship. And by the way, where is Coach Taveldi? He should be up here too, I believe. And do we have Coach... No, he doesn't? All right. All right, later. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Mojave's 2 VEX IQ teams finished 1st and 3rd in the state for programming skills. The 7681B team received a perfect score on STEM presentation, and the 781C team received the VEX IQ Excellence Award. The VRC team, 7681, won the Design Award for the VEX Championship. All 3 teams were invited to World Championships in Louisville, Kentucky in April. So congratulations. And we also have our Hohokam teams. Coach Mike Peabody. Is Coach Peabody here tonight too? There we go. Thank you. Coach Peabody is a parent volunteer who helped lead Hohokam's 2 teams to the state competition. The 2 Hohokam teams, Falcons in Flight and Falcons Alight, also did a great job at the competition. They placed 21st and 22nd in the VEX IQ Championship. One of the teams received the Judges Award for Sportsmanship for its exemplary behavior and teamwork. Congratulations to all of the teams. Okay, so teams, here's what I understand. There's a short presentation by Mojave. I'm going to ask you guys in a second, go back to your seats, and then once that's done, I believe we'll get certificates for you, and you're going to go right outside that exit sign for some pictures, okay? All right, thank you. You can go back to your seats now. We're good.
Madam President, Governing Board, Dr. Peterson, Mrs. Como, fellow members of our school district. Robotics is a lot about improvisation. I brought some laundry here. Because I had prepared some notes. I'm sorry that we did not have it completely synchronized, but you will figure out why that happened. I need to make a little correction, though. I'm not the coach. Right now, I think what I call myself is manager or something like that, and try to do all kinds of things to support the coaches. Actually, Dave Norris, who is our 6th grade math teacher at Mojave, volunteered without knowing anything to become the teacher on record for VEX. And he had a blast. He could not be here today. He's very busy with a lot of other activities. I do want to recognize the people who really made this happen, the adult mentors. Glenn Clevenger, Robert Williams, Jason Anna, and Chris Martindale. And they're in the audience right here. If you would stand up, please. Truly, that's become a culture of engineers stepping up and helping out the program, and that's what we're really proud of. Also, the Saguaro Sabercat mentors, who created a culture of mentoring. They're mentoring at Kiva, they're mentoring at Mojave, and because of their attitude, we will see these winners return to Mojave once they go on to Saguaro to mentor the next generation of winners. And that, I think, is really what this program is all about. As for the celebration, Dr. Van Echten, I'm really glad you did all the hard work of listing everything, so I don't have to do that. Let me try to hit the core. These remarkable achievements are the result of hard work. Many, many hours of designing, building, programming, and practicing. These students showed grit, perseverance, and great teamwork. And that, I believe, more than any win or any trophy, that is what we celebrate. Now, there is a presentation. Before we do that, though, we have a guest here, too, or two guests, Patty and Rosemary Smith, who run the VEX program in the state of Arizona. And they've been really instrumental to the success of our teams as well in supporting in the background. We're very proud to invite Mrs. Smith, both of them, to come over to present the state championship banner to the VEX IQ team 7681C. But I'm asking all the team members to come forward because this was truly a collaborative effort. Friday on Fox Television, we will raise the banner into the gym at Mojave. But right here to present to the team, Rosemary and Patty Smith. Please step forward.
So we're with the Robotics in Education and Competition Foundation, and we're just recognizing some amazing students, an amazingly supportive school community. We'd love to see this happen throughout the school district, but just recognizing their accomplishments and a very innovative STEM learning opportunity. So teams, the Excellence Award is an overall excellence award at the state championship level. There were 32 teams competing from all over the state, and Mojave was the Excellence Award winning team. So we're just celebrating excellence tonight, and all of the people who made this possible and supported these students and their accomplishments. So congratulations.
And now, as planned, the moment you've been waiting for, real work. In conclusion, we'd like to give VEX IQ Team 7681B an opportunity to highlight the STEM research project that's right over there. We're going to move it over here so we can cover it on the camera as well. They were awarded a perfect score at state. Ben Yee, Miles Wall, Lainey Olson, Ashley Wilking, and Ellie Arnold will present briefly highlights of their presentation to the judges. Want to see 21st century learning skills, problem-based learning? Here it is. Let's do it, guys.
Hello, we are Mojave 7681B, and I'm Benjamin, this is Ashley, this is Elena, that's Ellie, and this is Miles. We'll be doing a short presentation on what we did for the STEM project at the robotics tournament, and the topic was CNC machines. So you may be wondering what a CNC machine is. Well, a CNC machine is a tool which is connected to 3 or more motors to move it in 3 or more directions. This tool can either add or subtract material to either make and create whatever you would like.
CNC uses a program called G-code. It is used CAD, which is computer-aided design, to design the part, and then CAM, which is computer-aided machine, to transfer the CAD drawing into G-code.
CNC machines are being used a lot in schools, and they can be used more often. They can be used for science projects, art projects, and future cities projects. They can be used to make parts and design a lot of stuff. So,
CNC machines incorporate all of the aspects of STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. They are perfect in schools because it encourages students to invent and learn new things.
CNC machines are also used in real-day applications all the time. From being used in space to get parts that are cheaper, and if you forget to send up a part, you can immediately print one in the International Space Station. They're also being used to make affordable prosthetic limbs for children who can't afford them, or that they have to replace them every 1 to 2 years because their arm goes. So it is very expensive to get one every 1 or 2 years. So a CNC machine can help you get one that's customizable and affordable.
That's it. And then this is a demonstration of what the machine can do.
This is something that a CNC machine can make. We used our CNC machine made out of Vex parts to carve out Vex onto this piece of foam.
Very cool.
And we want to wish you all good luck as you go on this next month for your next competition.
Absolutely.
We're proud of you guys. Good job. Next, Dr. Mitch Von Echten will recognize 2 Arcadia High School students who are recipients of the 2015 Prudential Spirit of Community Award.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. If I could have students Erica West and Jacob Stoudemire join me at the podium. Are you here tonight? Jacob? It's for you. Erica's not here. Governing board members, 2 Arcadia students were recently recognized for their volunteer work to improve our communities. Erica West and Jacob Stoudemire received the 2015 Prudential Spirit of Community Awards. We appreciate the hard work of these students inside and outside the classroom. Congratulations, Eric. Appreciate it. Excuse me, Jacob. Thank you.
As you will see, this is the Dr. Mitch Von Echten show this evening.
Yeah, there's
he
plenty
is
more
going
coming.
to continue.
This is a good thing.
He is going to continue by recognizing Mary Townsend, a senior honor student at Coronado High School, for her many accomplishments as an SUSD student.
Mary, could you please join me at the podium, please? There she is. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
For you. Mary's accomplished many things in her time as an SUSD student. Now a senior honor student at Coronado High School, Mary's involved in the ACE program, which allows her to attend classes at Scottsdale Community College while in high school. She's been taking classes at SCC since her sophomore year and is nearing the completion of an Associate of Arts degree. Mary takes a theater class and was recently in the production of a play that was entered into the Kentucky Center American College Theater Festival, Region 8, and Mary was nominated for the Irene Ryan Acting Scholarship. She's part of the Coronado Advanced Choral Ensemble, we heard her sing tonight, in fact, which competed at the 2015 NAU Jazz Madrigal Festival on March 6th. Congratulations on all your achievements, Mary. Students like you make SUSD a great place to be. And did I lose Mary? There she is.
Congratulations, Mary. And some of Mary's work is helping us as we move next year to have Coronado High School be an early college high school that will truly integrate our college-level courses into our classwork and for graduation requirements, so students can graduate with a high school diploma and a community college degree at the same time. And we're very excited about the work Coronado has been doing to have that happen starting next year. Next, Dr. Mitch Von Echten will recognize 2 Chaparral High School students who were named winners of the Arizona Educational Foundation's 2015 Polly Rosenbaum Writing Contest.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Do we have Jessica Myers and Ari Cohen with us tonight? Could join me? That's all right. 2 Chaparral High School students were named winners in the Arizona Educational Foundation's 2015 Polly Rosenbaum Writing Contest. In the 9th and 10th grade category, Jessica Myers took first place and Ari Cohen received an honorable mention. For this year's contest theme, the students were asked to write a creative piece convincing non-voters to take part in voting. Congratulations to both Jessica and Ari.
Another writing contest that Scottsdale School students are being successful in this year is the 2015 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. We will recognize winners of the 2015 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. Desert Mountain High School, Chaparral High School, Cocopah, and Desert Canyon Middle Schools all submitted several gold and silver award-winning entries. 2 Chaparral students won American Voices Awards, which are given annually to just 5 students from across the state. We took home 2 of the 5.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson. Desert Mountain and Chaparral High Schools and Cocopah and Desert Canyon Middle Schools all came out winners at the 2015 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. All 4 schools had students take home awards. From Desert Mountain High School, Hannah Weissman won gold, silver, and an honorable mention. Allison Boyce won gold and an honorable mention. Ankanksha Sahina won gold and silver. Zoe Isaac won gold. Ashley Klein and Brenley Markowitz won silver and an honorable mention. Dylan Angle, Grace Gay, Akshar Pandya, Kara Sherman, and Jessica Wood won silver awards. Asif Betcher and Francis Yao were given honorable mentions, and their teacher is Kevin Shea. From Chaparral High School, Amanda Pruitt won gold, silver, and an honorable mention. Kamren Gilbard won gold and an honorable mention. Both Amanda and Kamren won American Voices Awards, which is a biggie, and are given annually to just 5 students across the state. Taylor Shuchuk won gold. Max Bartlett, Hannah Cooper, Alexa Ehrenfrond, and Emma Hay won silver awards. Ellie Greenwald and Alexandra Yang were given honorable mentions, and their teacher is Christine Marsh. From Desert Canyon Middle School, Katie Barnhart won gold, silver, and an honorable mention. Grover Greenberg and Logan McAvoy took silver. Gendon Agina, Cooper Bruce, Max Braun, Julian Marks, and Madeline O'Rourke were given honorable mentions, and their teacher is Kelly O'Rourke. And from Cocopah Middle School, Kate Hammond won silver, and her teacher is Marcia DeMuro. I apologize to any names I mispronounced. And if those teachers and students are here, could they please stand and be recognized?
Foreign language is also doing well in Scottsdale schools. Dr. Von Echten will recognize Aaron Blecker, who is a Mandarin 5 student of Dr. Yuang's at Chaparral High School, who won 3rd place at the Arizona State University Language Fair on March 4th.
Thank you. And do we have Aaron Blecker here tonight? Recognized? No? Aaron Blecker is a Chaparral High School Mandarin 5 student of Dr. Wan, who took home 3rd place at the 2015 Arizona State University Language Fair on March 4th. He competed against students from across Arizona, including several heritage speakers. Congratulations to Aaron for his accomplishments.
And our final student celebration this evening is the Desert Mountain High School Varsity Cheer National Division Champions.
And do we have our cheer team here with us? Could join me up at the podium? How about Coach? Coach is not here? All right, well, come on out, though. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations to the Desert Mountain High School varsity cheer team who were named national champions of the small varsity division at the Universal Cheerleaders Association West Coast Championship held in Anaheim, California. Great job of representing the district. Thank you very much.
At this point, the next item on the agenda is item 6, public comments. And before we do that, I just have to read a little bit. This is the portion of the SUSD Governing Board meeting when we invite the public to make comments. Although not required to do so, the Governing Board values the input of the community, so we feel it's an important part of communication with our stakeholders. As explained on the cover of your agenda, anybody who wishes to address the Governing Board will fill out and submit a blue card for non-agenda matters and a white card for agenda matters. For non-agenda matters, please take note that the only action that we can take as a result of this kind of public comment will be limited to responding to any criticism made by those who have addressed the Governing Board, or directing staff to look into the matter, or asking that the matter be put on a future agenda. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01G, no other discussion or legal action is allowed. For agenda matters, please indicate your desire to speak and record the item number on the card. Public comments on agenda items will be grouped into appropriate categories. Please approach the microphone when your name is called and in the order called. If there are a number of comments, we value your time and would ask that the person be ready at the center aisle at the back of the room. There's a 3-minute speaking limit, and Vice President Jackson will hold up the cards indicating the time that you have remaining. In all cases, public comment is subject to reasonable subject matter, place, and manner restrictions. Please word your comments so that they are not defamatory or disrespectful in nature. This evening, for non-agenda matters, I have Cindy Calvetti.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Peterson, and members of the board. My name is Cindy Calvetti. I'm a Scottsdale resident. My children go to SUSD schools, and I'm an active member of the community. I was active in promoting the SUSD override. I work at Coronado High School. I'm the school's Title I interventionist, math interventionist, and Title I specialist. I have taught all math classes from pre-algebra through AP calculus. I recently earned my master's in special education from Grand Canyon University. I volunteered many, many hours to Coronado swim team. My family donated shirts and some suits to the Coronado swim team. I volunteer my time at lunch every single day by having my classroom open as a mathematics lab where students are invited to come into my classroom to work and receive help if they so choose. I also tutor a few days after school each week through Coronado's DEAL program, part of the 21st Century Grant. I'm here today to talk about the horizontal movement. I made the decision 2 years ago to better myself and become a more proficient educator by getting my master's degree. Being a math interventionist, I do work with many students who have learning disabilities. I decided to get my master's degree in special education as I thought it would better prepare me for helping my students with the work. Getting this degree was a strain on my family. It took lots of my time away from my family and was very expensive, $17,061. My first payment is due today. I justified this by knowing that I would get compensated in the years to come by moving over horizontally on the pay scale. I did have some of my classes done last year and did apply for horizontal movement last year and did receive a one-time payment this year for moving over one column. It should have been 2, but I didn't fight it. I now have enough credits to move over 2 more lanes. I'm very disappointed in how the horizontal application movement process was carried out this year. I feel it was very sneaky. And now I find out that as of now, I will only get 1 column movement for next year when I should get 3. When I rallied for the override, one of the reasons was because the horizontal movement was supposed to be restored. I take that to mean it would put people in the correct column they currently should be at, not what they applied for last year. Missing the 2 horizontal columns plus the vertical movement I should get, taking into account that that as of now we are only receiving one vertical movement for next year instead of being placed in the correct row adds up to a difference of $4,382 in what I'm slated to be paid for next year and what I should be paid based on the pay scale. It's not fair. If you had to hire a new person with my qualifications, they would receive that money. The district is making it obvious that good, loyal teachers are not a priority. You would rather us leave and hire somebody else with either less qualifications or pay them more than you do your loyal employees. I enjoy working here at Coronado and believe we are making a difference in the community. I enjoy the staff and administration here and believe we are all working very hard to make a difference in the lives of our students.
Thank you. The next person up is Haley Fortney.
I apologize. Apparently I filled out the wrong color card.
No.
Dear Dr. Peterson and esteemed members of the board, my name is Haley Fortney, and I've been a middle school teacher at Copper Ridge for the past 5 years. If there's one thing I've been to this district and my school, it's loyal. It's the first place I started teaching, and I want it to be my last. As a kid, I was raised that if you work hard, good things will come to you. So I come in early, I stay late, I host and volunteer for almost every major event on my campus. I give up my spring breaks to take middle schoolers to DC and New York, and I give up weekends to chaperone tolerance camps for students. I've served on 3 school committees, or I've served on 3 school committees and have served on 1 district committee. I teach classes, run student council and yearbook, and I've won Teacher of the Year. I've come to learn that my efforts in SUSD aren't valued, and that there is no reward for my hard work. Instead, for all my work, my district chose to pink slip me 4 out of 5 years I've worked for them and give me more responsibility for less pay. Now, you might be thinking, but teachers didn't get any pay cuts. And yes, you'd be correct. However, I make the same amount now as I did my first year's teaching, and I know that there's many teachers who have weathered the storm longer than I have. But we pay for our own insurance now, which we didn't used to before, and costs keep going up every year. And raising insurance premiums, again, it seems to be one of your solutions this year. The 2% raise I was promised 2 years ago was taken away, and the 301 money I earned, I was promptly asked to forego and save fellow teachers from losing their jobs. At the end of last year, I decided that since my husband didn't have the opportunity to go to college and makes less than I do, that I was going to have to be the breadwinner for the family. This meant that I was going to have to go back to school and better myself to make enough money to support a family. That's exactly what I did, and I have 1 semester left before I receive my master's degree in special education, and I have nearly 300 hours of professional development just sitting there. At the start of this year, Dr. Peterson and his people came to my school to get a pulse of the district and feel of how teachers were feeling. And as one of the teachers said, the big elephant in the room was the fact that none of the teachers have received vertical or horizontal movement in over 8 years. With this being said, teachers were encouraged by district leaders and told that the only way to get money back to teachers and back in the classrooms was for the district override to pass. So, in my naivety, I believed you. I passed out flyers, posted on social media, put a bumper sticker on my car, called people I knew that lived in the district, and talked to them about the override, because I believed that this was going to be the turning point, that this was going to put SUSD back on the right track. The fact that we are considering not giving teachers the horizontal movement they were promised sickens me. Stop cutting from the teachers, from the students, and from the classroom. Board members, I thought that morale in this district couldn't get any lower. Teachers are the start of good education, and by devaluing your teachers, you are undermining this district's ideals of providing quality education with quality teachers in the classroom. And I can promise you that if you go through with this and choose not to treat your employees with the respect, gratitude, and compensation that they were promised, you will have hundreds of teachers seeking employment elsewhere. And I will have lost complete faith in this district and the system as a whole. Thank you for your time. Oh, go Trailblazers.
Thank you. Janine Hilton.
Thank you for your time in allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Janine Hilton, and I am a teacher here at Coronado High School, as well as being a parent for students at Cocopah, Chaparral, and Saguaro High School. As both an employee of SUSD and a parent within your district, I am angry and mystified at your decision to deny myself and others the horizontal movement that was promised with the passage of the override. As I stated, I am a math teacher here at Coronado High School. I am also the chairperson for the S3 PBIS committee. I work on the AVID committee, and I am a member of the RTI committee here at Coronado. I am also the sophomore class sponsor and have received excellent performance reviews every year that I have taught here. I earned my master's last October in special education so I could be a more effective teacher to those students with IEPs and 504 within my classroom. I was willing to sacrifice the time, effort, and finances for this because I understood my pay would increase with this degree and I felt it would benefit my students. This district has also paid me to attend many seminars and training sessions for AVID, PBIS, and student government, and yet you do not value me as an employee. You will not pay me for the years of service I have been a teacher, and you will not pay me for the horizontal move for gaining my master's degree. I will say this as clearly as I can. Your decisions have made it clear you do not appreciate my teaching, my commitment, my support, and my training. You are willing to force me to leave this district and go to another district to get the pay I deserve rather than to pay me. However, you are willing to pay the teacher who will be replacing me from another district the salary that you will not pay me. You will not know if this teacher will be willing to participate in the committees to improve the school. They will not have the professional development training that you have paid me to receive, and yet you will be willing to pay them what you are not willing to pay me. As an employee, this makes me very disheartened. As a SUSD parent and taxpayer, this makes me very angry. I do not want my tax dollars to pay for professional development training for teachers, which you then encourage by refusing to pay them to go somewhere else and take that training with them. I have many friends in other districts, Paradise Valley District, Deer Valley, and they speak with respect and admiration for their district administration. And please understand, I am not talking about Coronado's administration, and I'm not talking about the school administration when I say that you have developed a culture of animosity and distrust between teachers and district administration. Until there is honest communication and forthright actions taken, you will never improve the discouraged atmosphere that you have recreated at Scottsdale Unified School District. I am asking you to reconsider your position on the horizontal and vertical move pay for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Nancy Cantor.
Oh, I don't like what I just heard. And I was going to talk about something else. I was going to talk about the Coronado Complex and the fact that you guys need to reach out and communicate with those people since the fiasco of the resource center. And I still think you need to do that. An effort needs to be made, whether it's a special meeting on a Saturday to discuss. There are ideas out there. There are questions out there. There are a broad spectrum of solutions that are being recommended out there, but nobody from the district wants to talk. Now I'm going to take a giant step back because I'm a Coronado grad, so that's historical. These teachers are the boots on the ground. They're the ones who do the job. Nobody else. I had a friend, Mr. Tom Carey, God bless him. And Tom used to tell me, give me a tree, give me a kid, and I can teach. But we've come a long way since that time, where kids could sit under trees and be taught. Teachers have far more responsibilities. Subjects are far broader. They're more in depth. We need people who have the commitment, and people who further their own education certainly are showing commitment, and people who stay after to handle special programs and events certainly are showing commitment. For me to hear that they're ready to leave, but you would be willing to pay somebody brand new without the history of the community to do their job, no. For a while I taught civil disobedience at Carnegie Mellon University. I don't want to have to participate in civil disobedience again, but if we're going to be abusing educators who are doing the job every day, I'm there. No problem. This is wrong. You need to fix it.
The next we have items that are, let's see, on the agenda. Well, Mrs. Cantor, we have you back up again.
I didn't believe She's ready to talk. What's next? The other question?
The action, the item on governing board policies you had written down.
I'm glad to see that you've taken some changes, because quite honestly, I was a bit surprised, particularly over the fact of your attorney not being able to talk and represent you as a board when that subject came up at work study, that she was there to advise administration. Again, a history lesson. I was here in 97 and 98 when the Attorney General's office came down on us as a district for contract and procurement law violations, and found over $11 million in violations and indicted 8 people and put us on probation for several years. Fortunately for us, they did take the fine that they put on the district and put it in an escrow account, so if we could go for a certain period of time, they give it back to us. Yeah, we blew it the first time, we got it back the second time. I don't want to see anything like that happen to anybody again. It doesn't need to happen to the district, but we have to be particularly careful in how we do things. And I don't like the feedback. At any rate, I want to see things done in an open way, discussed with people. This whole situation that grew out of the resource center at Tonalea was a mess, a real mess. And it brought a lot of conflict within the community, still has some conflict. Someone's still calling people and telling the neighbors in the Tonalea neighborhood that they're not good people because they won't let a garden for the homeless be on those school grounds. People are still asking questions. So I'm glad to see that you've made some changes, and I'm hoping, beyond hope, that we will have a way to look back at the end of the year and make sure we've done all those things that need to be done in order to communicate as well as we possibly can on every issue with the community.
Thank you. Next is, and the last comment is Mary McCarthy.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's been a while since I have had the pleasure of making comments at a public meeting here. I'm a parent. I have a great deal of respect for all of the members of our board and our administration, but I came today to talk about our teachers and the budget process. We all know how much trouble we had getting our override passed. We worked and we worked and we worked, and we finally got it. The thing that we found out from that, I think, is that public relations do matter. They matter a great deal. As many of us are aware, they matter so much because we have a great deal of competition now in the form of state-sponsored privatization of education through funding of charter schools. It is a nightmare for us. The very best thing we can do to create good public relations is to pay our teachers well, treat them with respect, show them that we value them, their contributions to our children and to our community. They are our front line. Most parents in this district could not name one of you if you paid them by the minute. They don't know you. We only end up knowing you guys when we come to complain about something or there's a big problem. We don't know who our department chairs are or anything like that, but we all know our teacher. And they are the people who keep our children coming back, who get our kids excited about education, who move us as a community together. So when you're looking at the budget, and I understand we're back there again because, of course, state's never going to give us the money they owe us, at least apparently not. Do what you can, everything you can, to get our teachers the monies they were promised, the monies they've earned, and desperately need and deserve. And I don't speak as a single parent. I'm speaking as a member of a variety of groups, as y'all know. And I know you'll do the right thing. I have a lot of faith in you guys. So thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 7, Superintendent Comments.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. And I would just like to let folks know that the decision for horizontal movement has not been made. That's a meet and confer item that has not been finalized with meet and confer. So even though it was said tonight, I want to clear the record. That has not been made, and it's something we are looking at. So I want to be very, very clear about that, because it was stated that it was made, and the governing board has not made that decision. The administration has not made a recommendation to the governing board regarding that, and we are looking at that and what possibilities we can do to support it. All teachers that had horizontal movement over the last several years that got a one-time payment in October will be honored, and they will have that moving forward for the rest of their contracts in Scottsdale schools. And what we're looking at is horizontal movement for teachers this year. But all past horizontal movement that received a single payment in October will be honored moving forward, and that we committed to with the override, and that will happen. So I just want to clear that up, because I believe there were some misperceptions out there, and I think it's important that we're on the record to clear that up. As I share my superintendent's comments, I am proud to introduce 3 new principals that, with your action tonight, with the consent agenda personnel actions, we are recommending and will be moving into principalships in Scottsdale schools. So our first principal is Gretchen Kaiser, who is going to be the new principal at Anasazi Elementary School. And Gretchen, introduce your parents. You're here with your parents. Show your parents. You're here with your parents. And we're looking very forward to your job there at Anasazi. Next, I'm proud to introduce Kristen Kinghorn. She's going to be our new principal at Desert Canyon Elementary School, and she brought a guest with her.
Good evening, Madam President, Governing Board, Dr. Peterson. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I made my husband come, and I've been in school administration now for 3 years. He's never been to a board meeting, so I made him.
You'll have to tell me your trick.
And then finally, our last principal that we are recommending this evening is Mr. Lance Huffman, who will be the new principal at Cocopa Middle School. I know we have some of the Cocopa staff. Susan is here, and we're going to miss Susan. But also, I'd just like to point out that Dr. Mitch Von Echten was Lance's teacher at Coronado High School years ago. And Dr. Von Echten said you still owed him some homework, so I did make sure we get that turned in. Congratulations, Lance. Next, I would like to recognize that the month of March, we celebrate National Middle School Education Month. This annual recognition provides us with the opportunity to focus on the very important time in the education of students. We're proud of our middle school students and our middle school teachers and all that they have accomplished. As a high flyer, the Arizona Department of Education recognized Scottsdale Unified School District for being a high flyer with students identified as having a disability, significantly outperforming the state average on the Ames test over the last 3 years. One of the many ways we accomplished this was by including students with disabilities into the core curriculum as much as possible. High expectations for all means high expectations for all, and we're proud of that recognition, and the state of Arizona has come to us, visited with us, and they are sharing our tips and techniques with the rest of the school districts in the state so that they can also have their special needs students achieve at the high levels that we have our students in Scottsdale schools. We're very, very proud of that, and we're proud of our special ed and our regular ed teachers that all work together to make sure our students are successful. Read Across America Month. We celebrated that this month. Many of us will be visiting classrooms, and many of us have visited classrooms to read with students. We encourage you to share a book with your student and to help create a sense of readers. Desert Mountain High School is celebrating their 20th anniversary. They are celebrating with a tree planting ceremony on March 20th. That's coming up. The trees, or that just came up. The tree was planted in the courtyard of the main entrance to the high school, and the ceremony was sponsored by the Desert Mountain High School PTO and Principal Nikki Wilford. The Arizona Science Tech Festival, several schools have participated and are representing Scottsdale schools in the Arizona Science Tech Festival. Saguaro, Arcadia, Chaparral, and Desert Mountain High Schools, as well as Mountainside and Cocopah Middle School, and Navajo and Laguna Elementary Schools showcased their work and took the opportunity to learn about the latest gadgets and new technologies. Our schools showcased their latest innovations using robotics, STEM technologies, and programs and projects. There was a lot of other interactive exhibits that our students participated in, and we're looking forward to next year's SciTech Festival. We'd like to also congratulate our Charles Foundation Outstanding Educators and High School Students of the Year. The Outstanding Educator honorees were presented with a congratulatory note and flowers from their school Charles representatives. They'll be honored by their peers and the community at the 30th Annual Outstanding Educators and Students Banquets Award on Friday, April 24th. Additionally, the San Francisco Giants and the Scottsdale Charles hosted the 2015 Scottsdale Giant Race. It was a 9K and a 3-mile race, and the race was on March 8th. We are truly grateful for all the support that the Scottsdale Charles gives to our schools and our students and our community. They truly make a difference in providing hundreds of thousands of dollars to Scottsdale schools, and we appreciate the work of the Charros. Last evening, we had the All-City Winter Athletic Awards Banquet. We hosted the banquet, and it honored athletes from Arcadia, Chaparral, Coronado, Desert Mountain High School, and Saguaro High School. It is one of the tri-annual banquets that's a way for Scottsdale citizens and businesses to recognize and honor the accomplishments of both academics and athletics of our athletes within our sports programs. The other unique thing about our All-City Awards banquets is we recognize the parents of all of our athletes, because we recognize parents put in a lot of time going to practices, driving students around, helping them late at night get projects done because they had practice, going to their activities, their games. And our parents truly do make a difference for our students and our athletes, and we're very, very proud of everything that happens in Scottsdale schools. Finally, a celebration at Arcadia High School. Sung Chang, who's an accomplished pianist and winner of the International Bosendorfer competition, visited Arcadia High School. He played a recital for the students and took part in a Q&A session that the students continue to talk about. So we're very, very proud of all the activities that happen in Scottsdale schools. There are great successes going on, and believe it or not, we are 7 weeks away from the end of the school year. It's going to happen and close quick, so hang on tight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. The next item on the agenda is a consent agenda, and I would like to amend it by removing item E. That item should be tabled to a future meeting. It was put in by accident. Oh, I have to turn this on so I can tell. Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. I'd like to remove items D as in dog and R as in Robert, please.
Okay, then I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes 5-0. So item D, personnel action items.
Okay, thank you, President Sneed. Yeah, I wanted to pull this. First, let me say welcome back to SUSD, Mr. Huffman. It's a pleasure to have you here. Regarding his appointment as principal at Cocopah, I trust in the interview process that Ms. Thomas was shared all of her hard work and her team's work in bringing on the middle school honors program at Cocopah, and that you are well versed in what the expectation is of that community and staff, et cetera. My question is actually to Dr. Peterson. You know, Mr. Huffman's relatively new administrator. This is a relatively new program. It's going to continue to need to be nurtured to take it to bright. And Dr. Peterson, I think it would be important to myself and to the community, the entire Cocopah community, to know that you personally will do whatever you can to support Mr. Huffman in continuing to nurture and build the Cocopah Middle School Honors Program.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirby, and governing board members. I'd like to point out that Mr. Huffman is a relatively new administrator for middle school with several years of experience, but more importantly, he has almost 20 years experience as a high school AP teacher. So he has the honors experience, and he understands what the students need to be prepared for to get to high school AP courses. So we were very, very confident, and the community was very, very confident when they interviewed him, because that was an important tenet of the community, that he understands the honors component, and he knows how students need to be prepared to be successful in high school AP courses. So we felt very, very good about that.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson, but that didn't answer my question. My question was, will you personally ensure his success and support the middle school honors program at Cocopa?
Absolutely, not only at Cocopa, but all middle schools.
Thank you. President Sneed, do you want to approve these separately or
Let's
together?
go ahead and approve that then.
Okay, I'd like to move that we approve item D, personnel action items 12715 through March 2nd, 15.
I will second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0.
Okay.
And the next item that you wanted to pull was item 8R, approval of revised purchase agreement for the purchase of land and real property located at 7575 East Main Street, Scottsdale, Arizona, formerly known as the City of Scottsdale Human Resources Building, and authorize administration to complete this purchase. Mrs. Kirby.
Okay, thank you. Couple of questions. This has been on and off our agendas, and so it's been somewhat morphing. At this point, I don't know, I'm looking over here because I don't know that you're going to be able to answer this particular question. At this point, do we know how much we are going to spend on this facility for remodeling, anything we need to do to make that facility habitable for the administrators that will be housed out of that? Because at one point I thought I heard we might need to replace carpet, I assume paint. I'm just trying to get a feeling for how, and what kinds of dollars that these would be.
Good evening. Board Member Kirby, board members, Dr. Peterson. In response to your question, currently at the end of the bond cycle, there was approximately $150,000 left. And so those funds, $150,000, has been targeted to the address for 7575. Just a few minutes ago, looking at my email, I have received a final drawing from I have an architectural team working on that. So I don't have a final budget number, and that is information. And so I'll be happy to share that with you as I know that.
Well, okay, do we have, when you buy a house and you know you're going to have to do some remodeling, you always have this kind of cap that you put on yourself that says if the remodeling requirements go above an X threshold, then I might need to back away from this house because it's going to require more financial outlay than I can handle right now.
Right.
So do we have our internal cap? Because what I heard you just say is that $150,000 is targeted, but what I didn't hear you say is exactly how much do we estimate we will be spending?
Approximately in the time frame of September, when I arrived at the district, we saw a budget of approximately $300,000. Now that is a budget that was related to the remainder of the bond funds at the time. And so if you look at a facility of that nature, it's approximately 13,000, 14,000 square feet. And so if you assign a budget for tenant improvements, for example, there's some minor wall work that needs to be done, and there's some carpet and finish, things of that nature. So if we just assign a number, then that will give us a budget. Currently, I'm looking at the project related to how much wall work we need to do or how much painting, because we're trying to be as efficient as possible. And so I hesitate to give you that number now because I really don't know how much scope is in that project.
Okay, so fair enough. So then now I might have a question for Ms. Marshall. So if we approve this tonight, and then we get a firm number on what the remodeling costs will be, will this board have another bite at the apple to hear what that number is before we approve the purchase of this building?
Well, I don't know for sure what Mr. Worcester's timeline is, but our contract does give us a 60-day period to terminate from the opening of escrow, and that is for any reason whatsoever. It doesn't limit us.
Is that an administrative decision, or would that come before the board?
I would say that should come before the board.
Okay. Should or will?
I will make sure it comes before the board.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, all right, that answers my questions. Thank you.
So with this, do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I move that we approve the revised purchase agreement for the purchase of land and real property located at 7575 East Main Street, Scottsdale, Arizona, formerly known as the City of Scottsdale Human Resources Building, and authorize administration to complete the purchase. Do we need to amend that language? I was good until the last 5 words.
Board Member Kirby, I think that you can say complete the transaction. That way we will execute it and we'll still have our 60-day period to terminate if we decide to.
Okay, so to complete the transaction as opposed to purchase.
I will second that. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mrs. Hartman, are you there?
Yep, aye.
Thank you. That's 5-0. So the next item on the agenda will be item, actually 9D, budget update. We are moving that ahead of item 9A for this evening in order to honor people's time.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Our CFO, Dan O'Brien, will present a budget update as we know it currently based on what information we have from the state of Arizona due to the legislative action and the governor's signature that just took place on the budget.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Peterson, Sandra. This evening, as it seems like we have done in years past, we will kind of start the process of going through the document that I've presented for the past several years on how we're building the budget, how we're coming along with the budget, what we know about the state budget. This year, it's a little earlier than we have in prior years, so that's a good thing. It's helping us out. Although we haven't seen the final details of the budget because it hasn't been released by the state, we do have some rough estimates. And we'll go through kind of how we built the budget, and then we will look at some of the items that have been brought forward by the state with some estimates, and then some ideas that we're bringing forward on how to balance the budget. So very top here, I'm going to try to actually go there. Again, we start with what our current budget is, which is just under $143 million. We have some items that have an effect on our budget capacity. So again, the $143 million is what our budget capacity is as required as set by the state. So we do have some items. You can see them there. We have a loss of ADM. We have a change to TEI. Again, that's Teacher Experience Index. We have some registered warrants. Again, we do not get the monthly payments of state aid. We receive our tax payments from our tax base, which come in November and April. So every once in a while, we have to kind of what you would look at, maybe call a line of credit with the county, where we dip into those funds sometimes. We have Career Ladder, the elimination of Career Ladder. This is a program that is being phased out by the state, and this will be the last year. We have the passage of the 15% M&O override, so that creates more capacity. And then you see there that it's the override combining with what looks like a little bit of loss. And again, as I've explained before, we have a 10% current override that's in a phase-out mode, and then we have the 5% K3 override. When we had the election, those are being brought together. So it's just reflecting the bringing together of those. And then we started off with no budget balance carry forward. And that leaves us at $145 million capacity. And then we look at that, and as I mentioned at the last time we discussed this, we've kind of take that and we roll all of our expenses. So we assume that we're going to spend exactly the same in all the budget categories that we did in the current year. So we have some effects on that. We have, obviously, with the career ladder going down, we do have those stipends for teachers that will be going away. We have loss of ADM for the FTE. We have workman's comp premium. If you remember last year, we used $1 million out of the Workman's Comp Trust to try to kind of get us through that bridge. Well, we will not be doing that again this year, so obviously we have some of that expenses. And then we have a reduction in ASRS. So employees will see a reduction in ASRS cost, and so will the employer. Again, it's a very small amount, but any amount that we can reduce will help. And then a lot of discussion, we have our M&O override commitments. And again, this is something that is, again, a living, breathing document, so it changes on a regular basis. Dr. Holmes, he's here somewhere, and I talk on a daily basis on a lot of these items here. So we have the certified FTE, so we're increasing those. Again, we're reducing class sizes by 3, targeted class sizes by 3. We're bringing back specials at the elementary sites, which will bring back full day Wednesdays. And then we have our band and strings for our 4th and 5th grade classes to bringing it back into the elementary instead of at the middle school that we have right now. We have assistant principals of 7, 5 at the elementary schools and 2 at high schools. We have the Desert Canyon Elementary principal, which we met tonight. I think she's left, but we met. We have bringing back the department chair's supplementals. Remember, in prior years, we had reduced them. We used some one-time funds to bring some of them back, and we're continuing to try to do that to keep that there. We have the horizontal move. Again, as Dr. Peterson mentioned earlier this evening, we did make a one-time payment in October for historical horizontal move. This is to take that and continue that ongoing in the future by placing it inside the teachers' contracts, which means they will have that salary going forward in the future. And then we have a 2%, equivalent of a 2% increase for all staff. And then as we've talked about, we've kind of done a few things of some risk management, but we've placed some reductions in the health insurance, so we don't completely fully fund it, and hope that our experience rating comes below 100% so that we save money and we fully fund that. But we want to get that back onto that so that we're not taking some of that risk if possible. So then at the very bottom, we have the anticipated budget capacity of a negative just above $5 million. I'm going to switch to the next page because these last little items are in a little bit more detail on the next page. So again, very similar to what you've seen in years past, the format you've seen in years past. We have our budget impact that flows from the last page. And then we have a few things. Currently, right now, we're anticipating approximately a $1.3 million budget balance carry forward. Again, this is still an estimate. It changes quite often as we start to see departments start to get finalized what they're going to be spending this year and what if they're going to spend all of their budget, if they're not, if some POs are going to get some money back, and again, some of those items. We then have the inflation increase that the state is required to give us by law. That is 1.59% for next year. Again, that is by Prop 301 law of 2% or GDP, whatever is less. I always want to try to go for whatever is greater, but we don't get that. It's whatever's less. So that'll bring in about $1.7 million. We then have what has been talked about is the $75 million that the governor is giving for what he's calling the inflation funding. Again, this is not a settlement. This is not the settlement of the lawsuit for the $313 million. This is Governor Ducey's commitment of $75 million. This is approximately $1.7 million. And then you see there a cut to the district additional assistance, which has been discussed a lot in the news. Remember that a district additional assistance is actually unrestricted capital and soft capital. Several years ago, the state of Arizona combined the two and then renamed it district additional assistance. So it's really capital. As we've discussed in prior meetings and for several years, Scottsdale Unified School District moves its budget capacity for capital into M&O. And we do that. We've done that for many, many, many years, and that has helped to support salaries and expenses in the M&O side. So this cut, because we move that money, is directly correlated to M&O. So we do have a cut. Even though it says district additional assistance, because we make that move, this is an M&O cut. So you can see with those plus and minuses that we come down to approximately $3.3 million. This is obviously something that we've been working on. We did have a budget committee meeting last Thursday. They are working through a long list of items, some that are revenue-producing items and some that are cuts. They voted once. We are working on those items to get those priced out, and we'll, in the April meeting, we'll vote again and look at some of those cuts. Administration has been working over the past week to try to come up with some initial cuts that we believe are possible, and also some of these correlate with some of the ideas that the budget committee has. So school sites of $94,000. Let me say right now that all of these items on here are personnel items, but they are either unfilled positions currently right now or what we might call vacant positions. So most of these positions are positions that are unfilled by somebody right now. That basically what we'll do is now, as we work through this process, they have been frozen because we got through the override, then we had the budgeter's budget. We weren't quite sure, so we did vacate them and not fill them at some time. So we will go ahead and just close those and then be able to use the budget capacity for some savings next year. So the school sites, this is mainly positions that have been closed. A lot of these are not full-time positions. So if you take a school site, it might be a .2 school noon aide that might be in the cafeteria. So they might only work two hours a day or something. So these aren't all just complete positions. Some of them are a lot of combinations of very small positions. So we have some noon aides and some instructional assistants at the schools that we have vacated or not filled that we can keep. Special education, Dr. Holmes, I'll mention him again, has been working with special ed and Dr. Sakos on continuing to try to find efficiencies in special ed and trying to find efficiencies in staffing, ensuring that we're staffing the proper way. Again, vacated positions. A good majority of these are paraprofessional positions. So either a student is moved or an IP is changed or whatever. Student has graduated maybe, and so we have some vacancies there that we can continue on with, and Dr. Holmes and Dr. Sakos and special ed are working to make sure that we still fill the needs of students, but then that we can create the efficiencies where we need to. Administration, this is across the board. This is actually administration. This is actually a commitment of administration to possibly reduce or reorganize some positions to create this savings. This is not all vacancy savings right now. Dr. Peterson and his leadership team are working to work on possibly reorganizing or making some other changes so that we create these vacancies, so we help the budget and try to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as we can. We then have building services and transportation. Again, a majority of these positions are vacated or non-filled right now. Myself and Terry are working together, very similar to how special ed is, to try to find efficiencies and to try to find areas that possibly we can create some efficiencies and savings with both the vacated positions and possibly current staffing, hopefully by attrition and some other things that we can do when people leave even throughout the rest of this year, that we can go ahead and collapse those positions and be able to create these savings so that we can balance the budget. And then we get to insurance. As we've looked at this, one strategy, and Dr. Peterson uses this example very well. The state uses what they call rollover. Basically what they do is they take dollars in June, roll them over, and don't pay them to the schools until July, which then makes them fall into the next fiscal year. It's a strategy. It works. And so we are looking to do that, which would mean basically that we could take the insurance payment, not pay it in June of 2016, roll it over into July of 2016, and it'll hit the next fiscal year's budget. That is something, again, since we are self-funded, a lot of times after teachers get out and employees get out in May and June, they go to the doctor. Obviously, it's the summer. It's easier for them. Well, those bills don't come in until July, August, September. So making a slight delay in the payment isn't necessarily going to make it that the trust doesn't have the money to pay it, because a lot of those bills take 30, 60, 90, 180 days to get paid when the doctors submit them and get through all the paperwork. So if you look at those, not quite at zero, still working towards zero. We have a little bit remaining of just over $700,000. I think we've heard tonight and I believe we will be hearing in a presentation very soon as we talk about capital and instructional and curriculum, that we're going to have a need for some curriculum and instructional dollars because the capital override is expiring at the end of this year, which is used to. So I think we have some work, not necessarily just to get rid of the 700, but possibly to get rid of more so that we can look at some of those other needs throughout the district and hopefully possibly be able to have some funds to be able to pay for those. And again, you'll hear later about curriculum, and we've heard some other items too this evening.
Mrs. Hartman, did you have any comments that you'd like to make about the budget?
None at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure you know that we're aware you're there.
I'm still here.
Okay. I have no comments showing up here. So,
okay.
Mrs. Kirby.
I'm speechless. First, I want to thank the teachers that came to public comment tonight for your courage to come out and make the statements that you did. It broke my heart. It really did. So let's start there, okay? I'm a taxpayer too, and last night one of the exercises that I went through is I compared the M&O Override Roadshow presentation to, if you'll go back up to the top, to the dollars that are in the 15-16 budget. The auditor and me coming out just to make sure that what we told the taxpayer we were going to do and the voters that we're actually doing it. And I saw the discrepancy in horizontal movement. And so let's talk about that a bit if we can, because what we told the voters is that we would spend $969,700 in horizontal movement. And what's on the sheet there, yeah, it's still consistent, $578,236. So my question is, what's driving the almost 50% reduction?
Sure. Board Member Kirby. Madam President, if you can see there, you can also see that if you look at the certified, the class size reduction specials bands, if you add those together on that PowerPoint that you were looking at and you look at this number, that number is higher. So what has happened is because we have estimates, we are now starting, again, working with Dr. Holmes to get in more confined dollar amounts. And in some spaces, we have a little bit of an over, and in some cases, we have a little bit less. You can also see that, I believe on the PowerPoint, that it had the Desert Canyon principal at approximately $95,000. We have it a little bit more now with who we've hired and the position that they are placed on the salary schedule. So it's, again, continuously working. It's not a finalized, but we do have some areas that could cost a little bit more, some areas that could cost a little bit less, and we'll continue to work with it throughout the budget process.
Okay. Let me try this again. I did do exactly what you said, and I was going to hit that next, because what I did is I combined specials, restoring elementary band and strings, and reducing class sizes by 3, and then comparing the sum of those to the $5,472,000. And in fact, we are spending in those 3 areas in our budget $332,000 more. So are you saying then that we, on the horizontal movement, it was $400,000 less? So are you saying that I need to combine all 4 of those line items to get the true spending versus the true budget versus what we said we would spend in the M&O Roadshow?
Board Member Kirby, Madam President. You can combine any of the line items. I mean, we can go through and combine them. You know, we're looking at it as a whole, and then we look at it individually. So as we continue to go through this process, we will continue to have those dollars moved to a more precise dollar amount as we go through the process, and we would be more than happy to bring back those details every time we bring back the budget.
Well, unfortunately, we're not scheduled to bring the budget back until May 12th. So I'll go ahead and submit that request right now that we bring this back next meeting, because I don't want to combine all of these buckets to where it becomes impossible to get comfortable with the fact that we are, in fact, spending the M&O override dollars as we told the voter we were going to. I would actually rather, my request was going to be, I want to see more discrete line items. For example, Restore Specials isn't up here at all. So I have to make the assumption that, well, it's in that first $5.4 million. It's all lumped together. Well, when we cut the budget, we had enough discretion where we could say, we're cutting by $1.5 million, and we are reducing by 29.7 FTEs, I think the number was. So we should be able to say we are, in fact, investing back in $1.5 million, as we told you, the voter, back in the fall, and that translates to 29 FTEs. And those 29 FTEs are going to these schools. Check. Now let's talk about band and strings. That's $140,000. When we cut it, that's what it was worth, and I believe it was 3 FTEs. We are going to be reinvesting that back into our budget, and those FTEs are going to these schools. Check. Reduce class sizes by 3 is the balance. And we should be able to do some very basic math to determine what are we paying those teachers and how many are they going to be and where are they going to go. So that's the kind of detail that I would like to see to get comfortable or to get to a point where I am comfortable approving this budget. Let's move on, if we can, to the 2% salary increase. In November, we told the voters that we were going to be spending $2.6 million, $2617050. That's now $2,190,000. Well, kind of think, well, 400,000 rounding error is not that big a deal. But if you actually stop and say, well, 2%, 2.6 million is 2% of what number? That's $130 million, almost $131 million of salaries that we told the voters we were going to be giving them a 2% increase. Well, 2.19 million translates into $109 million of salaries. So my question is, where did $21 million of salary go?
Board Member Kirby, Madam President, I would need to research that for you. I don't have that detail with me, and I'll be more than happy to bring it back.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the restoration of the principal, and you're right. We did say to the voters that would be $95,000, and today we're saying it's $110,000. Is that just salary, or does that also include benefits?
That's all costs. Board Member Kirby, that would be all costs. Again, okay. Now that we know distinctly what the person is, we can start to put more defined, because remember these numbers are from a week ago when we submitted the board the packet through board book.
All right. On the vacant positions that you said you were using to close the budget gap, with respect to the building services and transportation, are we leaving any vacated positions still in the budget? After we take out the $601,000, are we leaving any still in the budget?
Board Member Kirby, Madam President, these numbers right here have us closing all vacant positions that currently exist as of 2 weeks ago.
Okay. What about phased retirement? Well, do we anticipate any savings this year through phased retirement?
Board Member Kirby, Madam President, I believe phased retirement is not due until March 31st. So as soon as all those applications come in, we will be able to tie a number to that and start adding to some of these dollars if there are any savings there.
Okay. Other places that I would suggest, being solution-oriented as I am, that I would suggest we go look. First is, and I know they're one-time dollars, but there's a part of me that feels like that the $1.5 million in health insurance is kind of a one-time reimbursement. I would like for this board to discuss tapping into the general fund balance of $15 million for maybe a portion of that. And what and we don't have to do it tonight, but what the implications are of that. And then I feel like a broken record. I would encourage you to look at plant operations, our spending per student comparable to other districts. We are very much out of whack. I can't answer that question as to why we are. I personally think it goes far beyond. The delta to other districts is so great. I think it goes beyond just our capacity. There's something else happening there. And I'd like to know for the next time we meet, of the 601,378 of vacated positions, how much of that are in building services and how much of those positions are in transportation. And then if you could go back up to the first page, please. Okay. I want to talk a bit about the loss of ADM coming in at $4.7 million. And this isn't really a question, it's more of a statement. I wanted to know how much financial value there was to a 1% decrease in ADM. 1%. It's about $1.2 million. So for this budget, had we not had the decrease of ADM that we had, which approaches close to 4%, of $4.7 million, we would actually be sitting here tonight talking about what to do with a $1.2 million budget surplus, even with the governor's cuts. And so we talk about getting focused on driving enrollment. And we need to, that is our future, is driving enrollment. And if we think about, for every 1% increase in ADM, that results in an additional $1.2 million for this district to put into the classroom, which is what I heard in the community meetings that we just had. That's powerful. And then my final statement is with respect to the inflation funding. If you could go back down, I'm sorry, up and down, not that far.
It's right here too, but.
That 1.5% increase to the base level, I personally don't view this as a line item to balance the budget. We know in SUSD our teachers deserve more. And I'd like for this board to consider pulling that out and trying to find budget cuts elsewhere so we can dedicate that 1.5% increase to our sites, our teachers and our site leaders, and get them caught up to where they need to be, even if it's just a portion of that. Because if we just use that money right now to close our gap in our budget, it is forever gone. It will be forever gone. I'd rather pull it out, put it in a separate bucket. We may not know exactly how we're going to spend it with our teachers and our site leaders, but if it's isolated and it's protected, we can figure that out in the near term. But if we just use it as a line item to balance our budget, it will be gone. And I reiterate that for all of our M&O spending. We have one shot right now to prove to the community that we are spending these M&O dollars as we told them we would in November. If we cannot get to a level of detail where we can unequivocally stand up in front of anyone and say we did what we told you to do, we will lose all hope of establishing trust in this community. And so I hope that we can, President Snead, bring this whole budget back next month. As it stands right now, it falls very short for me. And I want to be able to be in a position to approve this budget in June.
Do we have any other comments from any other board members? Mrs. Perleberg.
Thank you. I would just like to support that request as well. Since I have been on the board for 2 years,
these are the topics, these are the questions, these are the concerns that our community and our SUSD employees and staff have. It's ripped our hearts out for 2 years, and I think it's time to start healing in this process as well. So I would like to encourage the board to have those open, transparent discussions and conversations, and with our administration, show that it's time to heal. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
I guess I'd like to mirror what Board Member Herbie said. I don't think there's a lack of transparency. We just need more detail, Danny. You and Dr. Peterson, I know that you're going through this process in an absolute appropriate way. But Pam's right. I'd like to see more detail, and I also agree. Horizontal movement. I too felt we have to somehow, if possible, find a way to bring that up to what we committed to. I know everybody's trying. I'm just saying I feel very strongly about that. We're in a very tough situation, obviously, with the cuts we're getting from the state of Arizona. I don't think we even know where we're going to end up with this, and I'm well aware of that. So it's not, I'm not outraged. I just feel that has to be restored to what, Pam's right, we need to, if we have to come through, if at all possible, this is for you and David, to honor the commitments we made for the override. That has to happen. We're in a tough situation. It was a lot tougher than we thought when we were out promoting the override. We didn't realize what we were going to be facing with from the state of Arizona and the cuts we were going to be getting. But that is, unfortunately, the hand we've been dealt. So anyway, I don't want to go on and on. I agree. I'd like to see more detail. I'd like to get into the numbers more and really find a way to bring these teachers up to honor the commitment we made to them with respect to horizontal movement. Anyway, thank you for all your hard work, Danny.
I wanted to thank you also, and I've already put it on the April 9th agenda that we will be bringing the budget back. I'm hoping at that time that we will have some more concrete numbers from the state, so we know that there's, even if the budget is passed, there's legislation that could impact our budget that's still coming up. So when the session is all done, I will feel much more comfortable knowing that we're not promising or spending anything that we don't have. I'm very uncomfortable making promises when we have seen when we've seen things happen in the past for the last 7 years where money's changed into a different account, and then that account at the state level, and then the account goes away, or the account is depleted. So I will feel much more comfortable talking about this as we get more concrete figures, but I appreciate the update in the meantime. I do know that at the time that we were going out at the override, I experienced 6 years of cuts, and I was really, really hoping that we would be able to celebrate having an increase, looking at an increase this year. And I do have one question. With the new formula of counting students, is supposed to go to real time. Is that for sure? Do we know for sure if that's happening?
Madam President, I believe you're speaking about the legislation that is changing us from our budget being built off of prior 100th day to current counts, very similar to what a charter school would do. That is not in the budget, is not supposed to happen until fiscal year 16-17.
Okay.
So it will not affect next year's budget. It could possibly affect future years.
Okay.
But I believe AD and some district leadership has expressed some concern, especially ADE, with their concern that they don't even actually have the capability of doing it. So it'll be a challenge, but we'll start working through it just like we are working through the budget and getting through with it. I do want to mention one thing, if I may, Madam President. You talked about getting to know all these things. If you remember from the last time we discussed the budget, the district additional assistance is a hard cut of the $113 million. So as we discussed last time at the work study session, that because the way that works and that it's not a per pupil cost, that actually fully doesn't get calculated by AD until October or November. So we will be as close as possible. We will be, I think, with Dr. Peterson, the board and administration, as fiscally responsible as possible, and we'll get as close as we can, and then make do with what we've got and figure it out in October and November if there's any additional cuts after that requirement is met.
I have to still, and I know I've done this for 5 years, but just express my dismay at the loss of the career ladder funding for our teachers. That's a direct, nearly 100% hit just to the teachers, at the same time that it's being said that that's what the state cares about the most. And I know it isn't necessarily the state's fault, the lawsuit. That lawsuit they're following. I'll just leave it at that. So, Mr. Jackson, did you have anything else?
It's unfortunate. I mean, we were so excited about the override. We all worked very hard, obviously, not just everybody in the community. And it's unfortunate that here we are, the community support us on the override, and here we are looking at, you know, for a lot of reasons, primarily from the state, looking at potential budget shortfall. We're going to have to start prioritizing again, I think, in certain areas, possibly. And I guess I just wanted to say, I do think bring teacher pay, teacher compensation has to be a top priority. That's all I wanted to say. It has to be. Thank you.
Thank you, board members.
President Sneed, may I request to speak?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Please, Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien, I just wanted to thank you for the detail here. And I wanted to acknowledge this statement because many times the only point of communication some of our community members have is actually this board meeting and perhaps even listening to it, similar to me, but after the fact. And there were a lot of questions about the budget, which are very fair questions. What I'd like to underscore is that this discussion is at this particular board meeting is really the tip of the iceberg for just the community to understand. There is a lot that goes beneath that level, sea level, and that includes the budget committee process, which you spoke of, our work studies, which you spoke of, which I feel have been very transparent and open and forward-looking in discussion to even get us to this point. So although there is always a need for more detail, I just would like to acknowledge that I think there's a lot of transparency in the process available to really anybody to participate in. And then secondly, I really would like to, as a new board member, underscore my commitment to the teachers as well. It's obviously I shouldn't say obviously, it is a priority. I think it's a priority of all of us, and I'd really like our teachers to understand that. With respect to the horizontal movement for 2015, I know that's a meet and confer item, so it's not really an item that's on this budget, but if we're going to bring it back next month, even if we do have that number, it may be worth, I would really like to see us included in it. And if we don't have the number at the time, at least a placeholder for it, just to demonstrate our commitment to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hartman. I had one more question. Is there an ACA impact to this budget? Is that what part of the insurance is? Do we have that impending, or do we have to prepare for it in a future year? Is it still in flux?
Madam President, thank you for the question. ACA is probably continuously in flux when we look at some of it. There is a small potential impact to it. We're not quite sure yet, based off when the look-back period happens and who we might have to cover. But we are continuing to get advice from our consultants to determine exactly what that is. So there potentially could be. I don't know what those figures are yet, but I don't anticipate them being very high for next year.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Kirby, I see a request to speak.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, listening to Ms. Hartman speak regarding the transparency, a suggestion as far as the level of detail would be to mirror what we did for the M&O for the override. When we were trying to garner the support of our community and their votes and the amount of transparency and detail we provided then, let's replicate that with our budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your suggestions, and I will see you back with all of them, hopefully. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is 9A, Assessment Committee Update and Recommendation.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This evening we have Dr. Andy Forlis and Mr. Roni Asali, who will be jointly presenting on the work that the Assessment Committee has been doing and a recommendation.
It all works. All right. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson, and Sandra. We appreciate the opportunity to provide an update as well as a recommendation from this committee about the future of an assessment tool within our school district for the 2016-17 school year. And Roni, oh, there he is. Good. Mr. Asali, our SCA president, and I will share the presentation as Dr. Peterson mentioned. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge any assessment committee members who might be here. Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Karen. And I know Dr. McNeil had to go, and Dr. Von Acton. Excellent. So thank you. We had a much larger committee, and we have some representation here listening to the presentation this evening. All right, let's see how we go here. Oh, here we go. To provide an overview of the presentation, we're going to start a bit with the context and share the situation that we're in with our SUSD contract for our current assessment vendor, as well as the Arizona standards and assessment. We know that that's changing. Every time we open up the newspaper, we learn just a little bit more about what this is looking like, so we want to provide an opportunity to share context. Also talk about the purpose of the assessment committee, what our work was designed to do, as well as the members who served on this committee, our timeline for our work, what we learned, as well as our need for feedback from our teachers and administrators. Mr. Asali will talk about the data to support the committee's recommendation. We will speak about the recommendation and then have an opportunity for discussion. So to begin, it's important to set the stage that our contract with our current assessment vendor, which is known as ATI, Assessment Technologies Incorporated, expires at the end of the 2014-15 school year. Our first contract with ATI began in 2005, and it was renewed through an assessment committee most recently in 2010. So here we are again, 5 years later, in the same situation. We also know that state assessment and accountability is changing in Arizona. We have a new test. We don't yet have the cut scores or the performance level indicators of what this new test will garner for us, and we also don't know what our accountability will look like. A lot of conversation. A subcommittee has made recommendations to the State Board of Education. We are being told that this will be teased out and provided to us in late July of this summer. There are also many unknowns about the actual test of Arizona Merit itself. Will it have benchmark assessments that we could purchase? If so, that might be something that we want to take a look at. We also don't know how student learning performance on Arizona Merit will impact teacher classification, a new, very important topic on the top of teachers' minds, as well as the future of pre- and post tests for teacher classification that was board approved here in Scottsdale Unified School District. So keeping all of that in mind, our committee was working within those conditions. So the purpose of the committee was to do 4 things. The first was to develop criteria for an assessment tool that meets the needs of our educators as well as stakeholders. When we think about stakeholders, we think about federal and state compliance. We upload data for lots of different things, such as move on when reading, teacher classification. We use our data to make decisions about course placement. We use our data to make decisions about grade acceleration as well as retention of our students. The second bullet was to create an RFP based on the criteria. Within that RFP is a scope of work and evaluation criteria as well. The third purpose of the committee was to participate in the review of proposals and vendor presentations, and then make a recommendation of an assessment tool that meets the needs of the stakeholders and educators that we serve. Let's see where we're going here. So let's talk a bit about who was on the committee. There were voting members on the committee, one teacher from each school that was recruited by Mr. Asali, our SEA president, 5 site administrators representing each learning community and level, elementary, middle, and high school, recruited by Mr. Art Velarde, who was our SAA president, 2 district administrators representing special education, safe and supportive schools, specialist PBIS coach that was recruited by district leadership, me, and then 3 district teachers on assignment representing K-5 English Language Arts, 6-12 Mathematics, and English Language Learners that was also recruited by district leadership, Dr. Karen Benson. We also had facilitators, and those were non-voting members of the committee because we were served in the facilitation role. The president of SEA, which is Roni Asali, the executive director of instructional services, myself, executive director of elementary and secondary ed, Dr. McNeil and Dr. Von Echten, Karen Benson, our director of curriculum, and Debbie Fowler, our student testing coordinator. Our job was to listen to the needs of the committee, bring information to them so that we can continue learning and moving forward. So here's a timeline of our work. We met for 12 hours beginning in January, moving through March. Most recently, our last meeting was on March 3rd, but we came to the recommendation that we are going to bring before you this evening. It's important for us to remember that the State Department of Education, State Board of Education adopted Arizona Merit as the state's ELA and math assessment in December of 2014. So we were waiting to get this committee started until we knew which tests that we were going to actually have. So what did we learn? We learned a lot in a short amount of time, and the most important thing that we learned was that teachers assess student learning in many ways. They assess learning by listening, they assess learning by observing, by working individually with students, by working in large groups with students. They use pre- and post-testing to measure student growth. They take a look at formative assessment to determine the learning during the instructional cycle, as well as summative assessments that come in many, many different forms. We also learned that assessment data is used by a variety of stakeholders for a variety of reasons. Some of those include to guide instruction and school improvement. So if we take a look at where we are to know where we need to go, that's one way that we look at assessment. To guide professional development, where is it that our teachers need additional support for learning to meet the needs of their kids? And then to comply with state and federal mandates. As I mentioned earlier, some of those examples are move on when reading, K-12 pre and post tests for teacher classification specific to our district. And then we also learned a lot about how assessment data is not used by a variety of stakeholders for a variety of reasons. Quick summary in these 3 bulleted items are the misalignment of test questions to what has been taught. Oftentimes teachers are following a curriculum map and they feel that their students need a little bit more time to reteach, or maybe they need to go a little bit faster. So what's on the test does not necessarily match the pace in what they've taught. And this also means misalignment of test questions that don't include anything that they think is important to be taught. So it was both. Tests provided by vendors are not indicators of what students know. That was a common conversation that said, I know what my kids need to know. My teacher-created assessments are most important to me to do the things that I spoke of earlier, to guide instruction and school improvement. And then an overall lack of trust in our vendor. So the committee had a decision to make. Once we took a look at what we learned, we also took a look at the context in which we are living and said, we are at a crossroads. Do we continue with the purpose and goals of the committee to develop an RFP and a selection of an assessment vendor in 2015-16? One of the things that we did in the committee is we looked at 2 current RFPs that are currently what we say on the street, one from Mesa Unified School District and one from Deer Valley Unified School District, as well as the RFP that was created in Scottsdale in 2010. So we looked at those to say, all right, these are some of the things that other districts are thinking about. Are we in a place where we want to move forward with this level of detail? Or do we want to continue with the current vendor for 1 more year, the 2015-16 school year, wait to learn more about the status of Arizona academic standards, state assessments, and accountability? So the decision was made by the committee that they would like to hear feedback from our teachers as well as our administrators. So a survey was generated it got started within the committee, and then we continued to revise and recraft and perfect the questions electronically with committee members chiming in. On February 27th, a survey was sent to teachers and administrators to gather their feedback, and on March 3rd, the committee reviewed the survey results. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Asali to share the survey results with you, but I think it's really important at this time to share that the survey was not the deciding factor. It was one piece of evidence or one piece of information the committee wanted to discuss. Assessment conversations happen all the time among teachers, among administrators, among principals, assistant principals. So the conversation of assessment is large. This survey is one piece of that conversation. There you go. I'm having trouble clicking.
There we go. Okay. Good evening. As Dr. Forlis mentioned, in terms of the committee, one of the biggest focuses that we had was communication. So as a committee member, sometimes it feels like the choices those committee members make is the end-all, be-all, and the pressure is completely on them. So we spent a good amount of time just sharing with them that part of your job is to also go out after the end of every meeting, gather some feedback, ask some questions, and then when we come back to the next meeting, we'll start processing those to kind of see which direction people want to go in. And the goal of that is, again, once the decision or recommendation was made on their part, it wasn't a matter of that one person sitting in the room making the decision. They had gathered feedback from their constituents. So when this big decision came up of do we go this way or do we go that way, the committee overall felt that it would be much fairer to at least survey people to get a feel for where everybody's thinking. And again, the survey was not the end-all, be-all, but it was going to be a piece in terms of the decision making. So survey went out, and here are the results. So overall, I have it broken down by teacher, district admin, TOA, site admin, and others. Others are people that didn't see themselves as fitting in any of those four categories, even though sometimes they did. So for example, a nurse who might not have known exactly where she fit just marked other, but we had that as an option. And you can see color-wise, the blue means impartial. The orange means they support one more year of use for ATI just for next year only to continue through the process. And the gray represents not supporting it and doing the RFP this spring to have it ready for the next school year. So take a look at that. And then the other data, so we took the teachers and we have those broken down, there we go, by each level. So we have elementary school, middle school, high school. And you'll see in the recommendation in a second that the committee was thoughtful and looked at this and had a lot of rich conversation and came to the conclusion that different levels have different needs. So that was a piece of it when making the decision that they were going to make. And then we broke it down further by site admin to see if there was anything that trended from elementary school, middle school, high school. You can see that right there. So after using the data from the survey, using the research, the conversations, everything that our members of the committee knew and the feedback they gathered, here's the recommendation that they came up with. I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and just read it right from the slide. So the assessment committee has taken on the task to look at what future assessment tools for pre-post, benchmark, etc. will look like in SUSD since ATI Galileo contracts expiring June 2015. It has become abundantly clear that different levels have different needs. Based on the time spent researching, discussing, and reflecting on the different purposes and types of assessments, the committee is recommending to extend ATI for only 1 year as a sole source to satisfy state and federal compliance requirements. Within their recommendation, they listed the variables as to how they reached that conclusion, one being more time for the state to finalize where they were going to land on things, the other being fiscally responsible to not commit to something for 5 years through the RFP process and then backtrack, SUSD to remain compliant in terms of move on when reading, teacher classification, growth components, and more time for the committee to spend doing research and work and to gather feedback from people to make sure they're thoughtful. So that was the rec, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Forlis.
Thank you, Lenny. Sure. And as we, Danny spent a lot of time talking about budget, so budget's at the front of mind, so I want to make sure that we include it in here. So what does all of this cost? Our agreement with ATI is that we, in the 2010 contract that we signed with them, the agreement is that we pay $8 per student. So if we took a look at the purchase order for the 2014-15 school year, that was a total of $191,400, $8 per student, based on our enrollment at the mid-September synergy report, and that we use capital override funds to pay for this expense. So the next step is on the April 14th, 2015 Governing Board agenda. We would like to bring a consent agenda item requesting that the SUSD Governing Board grant a one-year contract extension to ATI based on the recommendation of the committee. And with that, discussion.
Mrs. Perleberg.
Figuring out these buttons. Okay. Thank you very much, both of you and everyone on the committee, for addressing this question. It's my personal understanding that the questions themselves have been a long time coming for many of our different groups of teachers. I said it seems very clear that who needs us and wants us is there's certain groups, and then there's certain groups who it's not their favorite thing. So thank you for tackling this difficult topic, because I know there's a lot of emotion around it. What is a bit unclear for me here in the presentation is if, after your committee has looked at the different needs in different places, how does that translate into that $8 per student? What students can we just simply target for those needs that have been identified, and what student groups or teacher groups that we know that $8 per student may not be necessary? How does that break down, or is that possible?
Thank you for that question, Board Member Perleberg. Currently, our K through 12 teachers have some form of a pre-post assessment. So the vast majority of our teachers that are connected to kids administer a pre-post test for teacher classification. So that is the vast majority.
But now, is that pre-post test required to go through ATI? Is that necessary?
The pre-post test does not have to go through ATI. What it does have to do, the pre-post test has to, it has to meet the state requirements of validity and reliability in terms of the legislation of teacher classification. And ATI happens to have a system to be able to do that through their psychometrics. And it's a combination of efforts between HR and our SIMR departments that work together through ATI with cut scores and levels of teachers to identify effective, highly effective, accomplished, and so on. So that is our current system that we do use ATI currently to do that. I think your question is, do we have to use ATI to do that?
Well, yeah, I think I guess it begs the question, because it was proposed that that we not renew it for another year. So I was wondering what the plan would be in that case for the pre-post test.
So if we don't renew ATI, then we need to take a look at an RFP process to go through creating the RFP, which has a scope of work, and that would be included in the RFP to say we need a vendor who would generate all of the data that we need to comply with state law around teacher classification.
So it is not possible to do that in-house, is my understanding.
It is not possible to do it with our current staff, no.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying to think there. I'm going to make room for another question because I've forgotten my second, but thank you.
Sure.
I will.
Mrs. Kirby.
Okay, thank you. It's funny that you started your comments with these questions have been a long time coming. I totally by accident last night when I was doing some research, I stumbled upon the SUSD Assessment Committee update from April 13th, 2010. Which is what you talked about when we were renewing this. And I was absolutely fascinated that we had the exact same results back in 2010. Absolutely. We had double the response rate. We literally almost double the response rate across teachers versus administration. But what was the same is that elementary responses had a more positive, neutral view, middle school responses were just neutral, and high school responses had a more neutral to negative review, which was similar to what we saw this time around. And some of the comments that came out was that the Galileo system does not address an important need in schools. Galileo data is used to monitor student performance, but it's not used for budget allocations and to meet the students' needs that we're identifying. And so it was very insightful, but I felt like it was Groundhog Day. So having said that, and knowing that we've been here before, I want to talk a little bit about the immediate future, and if you can speak to House Bill 2246. And House Bill 2246, just for those that don't know your House bills by number, it's the parental opt-out of the state assessments. And that has passed the Senate Ed Committee, and it hasn't passed the Senate as a whole yet, I don't think. No. But my question is, let's just assume that passes for a second, which, back to President Sneed's earlier comments, there is some legislation. I think she was trying to make the point that it might impact us negatively, but this one could actually impact us positively if we can reduce our spend in particular areas. But let's assume that it passes. Part of this legislation says that these statewide assessments, and then therefore it begs the question, well, if you don't have to take the statewide assessment, do you really need to take the Galileo assessment to prepare you for the statewide assessment? But it says that the results can't be factored into teacher or principal performance. Okay. So my question is, and I want to set aside elementary for a second, so I don't want to, where's Dr. McNeil? I don't want to freak him out, because I know he really likes kids. I know the elementary principals do value this. I'm really talking more high school. Let's say this passes. What's the downside? What would be the obstacles or challenges to, at the high school level, not renewing the Galileo assessments?
I mean, Board Member Kirby, I'll answer that question, but I think we have a bigger question to answer. If that passes, we will lose federal funding if we do not have 95% of our kids tested. So to the state of Arizona, that's $600 million.
And what is that to SUSD?
We would have to calculate that specific to your question around the high school. So what would be the risk of if parents opt out? What would that look like with fund specifically to Coronado High School that receives Title I funds?
Okay, so we lose funding. Well, let's talk about the assessment, though. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's even more reason to not spend money where it's not being used efficiently and effectively. But do we, Ms. Perlberg was trying to ask the question about the pre-post test. Mm-hmm. That might be one reason why we would need to keep Galileo. But do we? Because of what H. Bill 2246 says, is that you can't use the statewide assessments to impact teacher, or to factor into teacher and principal
performance. And so, Board Member Kirby, let me be really very clear about our pre and post tests. Our pre and post tests are not state assessments. They are district created by Scottsdale teachers in-house.
So then again, why would we need them?
Well, we would need the assessments to satisfy teacher classification. Okay. Back to the other question, do you have to have ATI do it? You don't have to have ATI.
So you would need, so that's that 1040 you're talking about now?
1040 is morphed into the new bill on teacher classification, 2823.
Okay, so thanks for your patience. We're peeling this back.
I'm getting it.
Okay,
keep going.
So we're peeling this back. So if we need the pre-post test to fulfill another 20, what'd you say it was? 2823. Let me write that down. Okay.
And that's not recent. That's former. That's not current legislation. I mean, that's not recent. That's been 2 years.
Okay. We have today A teachers and B teachers. So the A teachers do the pre-post test. The B teachers use the district letter grade, which by 2246 gets frozen for 2 years.
Correct.
So why couldn't we just move all teachers to be a B teacher at the high school level?
We certainly could. We could do it for all of our teachers.
And would that meet, and I haven't read 2823, but
we can't do it for...
And you probably haven't read it recently either, so you don't have to.
Yeah, I'd have to look at it again. But I think the intent of the law was that you're not making all your teachers be teachers, that you are using assessment and taking a look at the growth of students. So I'm not sure that would really meet the intent that if we just had everyone become a B teacher.
But the whole law is kind of up for grabs right now. I think that's all in flux.
And the context of this committee is working and saying we didn't feel that it was smart to invest a lot of time in RFP development while we're in a state of flux.
And I don't disagree with you at all, but I'm going to even take it a step further, and I don't know if it's worth asking our high school teachers in particular, unless there's a particular site leader that does use benchmarking and this data, and the teachers are all bought in. Certainly there's exceptions. But I'm not sure that we need to make the investment in a tool that our teachers don't use and our principal or administrators don't rely upon, particularly when we've just had the budget discussion we've had. And could we take this as an opportunity to start pinching our pennies?
Let me just add one more thing about the funding, because we also remember that's part of our new 301 plan also, is we had to have that tied in there. So that data also is for our 301 payment. And then I'll let someone else tackle the question.
I'll do it. So in terms of ATI, we use it right now for two types of assessments. One is the pre and the post test, which is what's tied to the state statute. The other one are benchmarks. So I think the question there and the feedback that we get from the different levels is you get the elementary schools and some middle schools that really use the data from the benchmarks, where at the high school level, you don't really see much usage at all. So part of the conversation we even had in committee is if it costs $8 a student, can we wheel and deal with ATI and say, hey, we're just going to use it at this level for pre-post. Let's do it for $4 a student. We were thinking about it, so great minds here. ATI, however, is not wheeling and dealing with us in regards to that. So the question...
We can pose that to them. We haven't said yes or no.
Okay. Good to know. So the one, I mean, the issue at the end is we do have state statute right now. So in reference to what you're talking about, if you get 95% of students that opt out of the test, would we need to have a pre and a post test to measure student growth as it ties to teacher evaluation, since part of that came from the federal mandate anyway? The money we would lose from the race to the top or federal funding would completely outweigh the $8 that's being spent per student.
How much is that?
ATI is at how much?
ATI is $191,400.
No, the race to the top funding.
So
Board Member Kirby, it's the race to the top funds are already, it's a 4-year plan, and that money is already, our district got $136,000 over 4 years, and that's already expended. It's done, it's spent. Race to the top is not part of the conversation. It's our Title I, Title III. It's our entitlement grants through the federal government.
Madam President, Board Member Kirby, those would approach between $400,000 and $500,000 for that loss. That's 5% of the dollars that come in.
So we lose Title I and Title III funding if we fall below the 95% testing threshold?
Board Member Kirby, we'll come back with very specific information and very specific grants that are impacted by that. I don't want to just speak off the cuff to make sure I don't miss anything.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
But the criteria is 95% testing in order to be eligible for federal funds.
Okay, yeah. All right, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. No, yeah, I mean, and the only thing that I was going to just clarify with you is if we have to test at least 95%. Right? So if 6% opt out, we have fallen below. And, oh, that's another question I had. Does anyone know if this legislation is statewide? So is it 95% statewide, or is it 95% by district?
Board Member Kirby, it's more specific than that. It's 95% tested of every subgroup by grade level, by content, by school. So you need, if you have 40 kids in a group, so say at a school has 40 special ed students, 95% of those special ed students have to be tested. So it's by subgroup, by content, by grade level, by school.
Okay, fair enough.
So it's incredibly detailed. Well, it would have major ramifications for us.
Okay, I think number of unanswered questions, mainly what are our legislators going to do in the coming weeks? And I'd hate to put this on consent for next month and not have another bite at this apple to really understand what they've done down at the Capitol, and not having had the opportunity for you guys to negotiate with ATI. So I'd like to continue the conversation, please.
And Madam President, Board Member Kirby, we hear that within the next week or so we will know the outcome of that bill. I don't really want to say publicly, but from what I can tell you, it's probably not going to move forward.
Right. Okay. Well, let's see if we can wheel and deal with ATI.
Thank you. I think your committee has put more thought into all of the ramifications of everything that's in flux than our legislature has. So I'm so glad that, honestly, I don't think they even realize how sometimes some of the legislation that they pose affects other legislation that's out there and funding sources. So hopefully, if it's in Rules Committee, their legal department will inform them of some of this stuff. And while we're at it, I just wanted to thank you so much, Ms. Forlis, or Dr. Forlis, for your help with a lot of this legislation and showing how it affects classrooms, teachers, students on the ground. I know that your insight is invaluable, and the same with Dr. Peterson. It's helped us avoid a lot of bad things. So
thank you. We keep trying.
And you never get any credit for it. So I just wanted to make sure that was brought up at this time.
I appreciate that.
Mrs. Hartman?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, President Sneed. Dr. Forlis and Mr. Sali, thank you for your great work, and please pass the appreciation along to the teachers on the committee as well, and site administrators that participated in this. I'm supportive of the recommendation that your committee created. I realize, two comments for you just to carry forward as well. I realize there is no perfect test. And we're always in the pursuit of better information. So the one consideration as we move forward, and I think this is a move forward conversation, because it will not, I do not think by moving forward with one more year you're going to change this particular outcome. But on the committee learning slide, where we had talked about what we gain or what we'd like to gain from this, I don't think I saw teacher evaluation and professional development. Let's see, I'll wait to get to the slide there. Yeah, what I didn't see on there, I think on number 2, was to inform personalized development at the student level, personalized teaching, which I know that's the next probably level of these assessments. But it would seem to me that would be high impact, relevant to the student level, if and when we can finally get to that level as well. Is that a reasonable expectation down the road?
Board Member Hartman, I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront so that I can have the opportunity to make a connection. Our response to intervention systems within our schools that use an RTI model, they use our much of the data inside of Galileo to guide instruction for personalized learning. So that idea of guiding instruction is really around targeting specific knowledge and skills of students, primarily at our elementary schools. And we speak of Galileo, or ATI, the company, as the primary workhorse is that they provide our benchmarks and analyze our pre and post tests. But many of specifically our elementary teachers, create their own formative assessments inside of Galileo to do what you were talking about, personalized learning, and then designing instructional dialogues for kids based on their deficits or their strengths.
Well, Dr. Forlis, thank you. I appreciate the clarity. And how do we achieve that at the middle school, high school level?
Excuse me, can you ask one more time, Board Member Hartman? Did you hear?
Is this a work study question?
No, I didn't hear you all clearly.
She asked how we achieve that at the middle school and high school level.
Another great question, Board Member Hartman. I'm looking at the data that's broken down just a little bit more, and there is a significant decline in the amount of teachers that responded to the survey that used designing formative assessments at the middle level. We had 10 teachers respond at the middle level that they used the tool for that, and we had 1 teacher respond at the high school level that they use the tools inside of the product to design formative assessments. So definitely an opportunity for professional development, or should we go forward with an RFP into the future, this needs to be a hallmark of what that tool does and does well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hartman. Mr. Jackson.
I'll be brief. I just wanted, Dr. Forless, what an amazing committee, and I agree with Board Member Sneed. The thought that went into this process is impressive, really impressive, and the transparency and how it was approached is spot on. Mayor Board Member Hartman, I certainly support the recommendation, but also I agree with Board Member Kirby. If anything could be done to work with ATI to lower our expense, of course, please continue to work on that as best you can. Anyway, what an incredible committee, and thank you for your hard work on this.
Thank you. So in summary, our to-do list has become that we will work with ATI to see if we can get a better price, as well as continue to watch legislation, and then we will bring it back to the consent agenda on April 14th, because we'll have more information by then. If we have all of the information, correct. Because the legislation is still hanging out there. All right, thank you. And thank you, Roni, I appreciate
and
that,
I think we were asking to bring it for information discussion. You mentioned consent.
I'm sorry, information discussion on April 14th. Once we have more information, we'll bring to you prior to a consent agenda. Yes, thank you. Absolutely.
And Mr. Asali, I wanted to thank you so much for your participation. When I see different committees, I know that having a good cross-section of stakeholders that are connected to their communities is very important in coming up with a result that is accepted by most people. So thank you very much for your work. The next item is information item 9B, 9C, process for the sale of the education. Wait a minute. No. Okay, I'm confusing myself here. 9B, processes an update on the work of instructional material review committees.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Dr. Karen Benson is going to present the work that our our instructional materials review committee has done. They've done a lot of work, just like the assessment committee, and there's still some more work to do, but I think it's a great work and a good update.
A lot of committee work happening. Good evening, Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peterson and Sandra, and all those who are hanging out yet here with us this evening, and those that are joining with us online. Tonight I have the opportunity to share the progress and story of 4 instructional materials committees that have been meeting this year. Within this presentation, we will revisit our curriculum adoption cycle based on our capital override dollars allocated to us in SUSD. We'll situate the context of the curriculum conversations happening at this time, share our timeline and the committee members that have been engaged in this work, clarify what we know are important considerations for committees engaged in this work of identifying high-quality resources in 2015, and bring to your attention the website where persons can follow the work of our committees and what our next steps will be to support these content areas based on the work and recommendation of these committees. This has been hard work. We've not had to do this before. We're ending a cycle of capital override dollars, because we've had 7 years of fantastic taxpayer support. And so I am honored and humbled to share the progress of our 4 committees as an informational item this evening. It's been a long day. We've been here a long time. We've shared our curriculum adoption cycle in previous settings, but this cycle is particularly important this evening as it identifies the 3 content areas that are next up for review in our adoption cycle, and some are beyond our 7-year agreement negotiated typically during our adoptions. That means some of our online resources available for teachers and students have already expired this year or are set to expire and will not be accessible beginning next year. Specifically, the content areas we've been focusing on this year include social studies at grades 6 through 12, ELA at K-5 with social studies support for an integrated approach to that, ELA 912 and our world languages 912, but we include our middle levels in that because they begin world language 1 level high school courses at the middle school as well. In our world languages, we focused on our traditional world languages as our materials in the critical languages, Mandarin, Russian, and Japanese, were more recently adopted as we introduced those learning opportunities for our kids in SUSD. As a reminder, interested persons can find a list of all of our adopted instructional materials in every course and content area in the digital backpack on our district webpage. And for those that have never had an opportunity to visit our warehouse and understand the systems in place to distribute our materials, I'd invite persons to do so and meet the remarkable persons that coordinate the ordering and distributions of the better part of 10 million materials. For those not familiar with our capital override dollars in SUSD, our capital override budget has 4 main silos: technology, fine arts, library, and curriculum in the form of instructional materials. That latter curriculum silo has allowed us to allocate $1.4 million towards the purchase of instructional materials each year. While that number is significant, the world of instructional materials is a billion-dollar industry that includes textbooks, consumable resources, digital resources, and the technology tools needed to allow access to those digital materials. To put that amount in perspective, we spent just shy of $250,000 on textbooks for one course, Algebra 1, in 2010. To add a little more context, we used to receive monies from our state for capital expenses for curriculum. If we were looking at that curriculum adoption cycle, the year prior to receiving our SUSD override, we received over $3 million for these purposes from the state. Currently, we have no budgeted capital dollars for instructional materials. We continue to be very grateful for taxpayer support over the course of this 7-year override, as we know some of our neighboring districts have not been in a position to adopt materials for the better part of the last decade. We've tried to be very responsible and purposeful in the usage of those funds for the duration of the override. As a result, we've had a planned carryover of just shy of $600,000 from last year, giving us a budget of just over $2 million in our curriculum capital override silo at the start of the 2014-15 school year. Though the bulk of our adoptions in SUSD involve no annual renewables as we negotiate and purchase the materials for 7-year agreements up front, we do have a handful of important renewals each year. You just heard one of them mentioned, referenced in our assessment presentation. And the curriculum capital override portion to pay for those moving forward is right at $329,000. So as we've planned in our other capital override areas, we need to reserve that amount for at least 2 years to allow us to extend access to these materials we already have to try to get us to the potential of our next override. As is the case in all settings, no decision can be isolated from the context of the situation, and the complexity of the context has been well captured tonight. Much like the work of the assessment committee, our timeline for this committee was delayed until November to avoid confusing our capital override conversations with our M&O override and allow us to learn of election results both in our M&O override and with respect to which leaders would be filling important roles at the state level that would most impact education in the conversations we're having tonight. Those positions continue to affect our work as our standards and the test to measure those standards continue to be challenged, and the recently approved state budget offers little hope in future support from the state to provide dollars for districts to purchase instructional materials. So, our committee focused on that which we can control, being especially mindful of the current context and balancing the reality of our budget with the responsibility of identifying the best resources to support kids as 21st century learners and whole child beings moving forward. We kicked off our work in November then in all 4 groups, and many conversations and meetings, well over 21 meetings this far, have happened between then and now. Those are captured in the gray box on the timeline in front of you. We let our committees be autonomous and identify how many times they needed to meet based on the conversations that they were having. This timeline allowed us to meet our goals and bring you an update on their work this evening. Prior to sharing the progress, I've embedded a few slides to share the makeup or membership of our committees and how we've been purposeful in setting the stage to allow these committees to be successful. Experts in instructional materials work recommend that districts situate the bulk of the decision-making with teachers, the content experts in their fields. And that representation from parents, principals, and special areas are included to promote the communication between groups and ensure committees are looking through all lenses in their work together. Experts also recommend that knowledgeable facilitators are identified to lead this work and serve as non-voting members throughout the duration of the committee. Thus, that's exactly how we went about establishing our committee members to serve in this work. We invited teachers from every school and learning community to ensure equal representation on our committees, and we enlisted the help of our principals, department chairs, parent council, SEA, and SAA to identify members to serve in various capacities. We have 49 members serving on our K-5 committee and between 13 and 25 members on our secondary committees. Those numbers vary slightly at the secondary level, as we've included middle-level teachers in our social studies and world language committees because they extend into our middle grades. And given we had between 1 and 5 parents from different learning communities on some of these committees based on parent interest, and given we had a couple teachers share the position in one of our secondary committees. We continue to be very grateful for the time and commitment of all of our committee members. Collectively, they've invested dozens and dozens of hours this far to ensure any recommendations they are identifying are the most essential uses of our capital override dollars in our final year of the override. If any of our committee members and facilitators are here, I'd like to ask them to stand and be recognized at this time. Yay. As an aside, I did want to share that an observation of one of the vendors an outside vendor about our processes this year, and that this vendor indicated the work of our committees as the most fiscally responsible she'd ever seen. And given our context, I think that's significant, and I want to celebrate those that have engaged in that work and those hard conversations. Those successful at leading adoption work across the country also tell us it's essential that facilitators situate the work of instructional materials review and or selection as a time to really focus on curriculum, instruction, what's happening, and what should be happening in those content areas. Reviewing research and recommendations from leading organizations is essential. If that part is missed, typically persons on committees are most likely to advocate for a resource they're already familiar with, even if that product or program might be evaluated as deficit when compared to others. That's true of most market research that reveals persons are most likely to select a product pretty similar, almost 80% similar to the one they already own. We've also learned it's important for committee members to understand that there's no such thing as the perfect program or perfect resource, no such thing as a perfect process. Typically, instructional review work involves smart persons with strong positions as members, and as a result, there should be disagreement. To allow our committees to make progress, recommendations and decisions are made by reaching consensus by majority after determining the will of the group. We shared this information with our committee members as they convened this year, and we reiterated the following message again and again. The world of instructional materials is changing. We've been fortunate to have access to more and better open source digital materials to consider than ever before. Any resources that are identified and recommended by our instructional materials review committees that require purchasing from our capital override dollars must be governing board approved, and we encourage our committee members to be thoughtful about identifying those needs and fiscally responsible when making recommendations. They've heard it ad nauseum. To allow space for persons to begin to think outside the box, we posed this question at our first meeting with all 4 committees. In 2014-15, instructional materials review curriculum work should look like what? And then we've embedded an opportunity for our committee members to identify what we're already doing in SUSD to support students as 21st century learners and thinkers. You saw some of the evidence of that during our celebrations at the beginning of the board meeting. We have teachers transforming their classrooms and teaching kids differently and in more engaging ways in every school across SUSD. Sometimes these difficult positions or contexts are a catalyst to prompt persons to think differently. Recognizing this, we invited our committee members to think differently about materials, much like other districts, and some states are beginning to do, recognizing the availability of high-quality open source resources available in some areas moving forward. And we invited them to engage in collective problem solving based on the challenges of this time. One other important piece we shared at the onset of our work is that we responded to one of the most frequent questions we get from teachers when we begin adoption work, and that all vendors must stop communicating with teachers and persons within the district once an instructional materials process has begun in that content area. That's pretty significant. We know vendors know that our persons, including teachers, tend to develop an affinity for that which they are most familiar, so pilot programs are especially successful in education. Thus, as we begin to review materials, we notify vendors they're not to contact our teachers, and all pilots must stop in the areas that we're discussing. I have appreciated the conversation at the last couple board meetings, especially last Thursday, as board members discussed the importance of developing a shared understanding amongst committee members, as that kind of understanding leads to confidence. Previous slides in this presentation have included some of the shared understanding we've tried to promote in these committees engaged in this work this year. But most important to setting the stage of the work, we shared what we know to be the steps and purpose of successful instructional materials work with our committee. All of our committees reviewed the content standards specific to their area, researched recommendations of what materials and instruction should look like, evaluated our current resources, identified gaps or needs, and then investigated resources, strategies, or tools we already have to fill those gaps, and those we may need to fill or address any gaps that have been identified, considering our open sources, digital resources, unit development by teachers, and possible adoption or RFP work. All 4 of our committees are in their final stages this year, making recommendations to address what they identified. Oops, I'm going to go back one. Key to our committee work this year is that each of our curriculum specialists crafted a document and a system to solicit input from our teachers across SUSD to help us identify gaps and needs specific to each grade level and content area under review. This involved our department chairs and lead teachers at the high school and middle school levels, and we reached all teachers at the elementary level, as Diane Murphy has systems in place to solicit feedback from our elementary teachers annually. The curriculum team has been purposeful to allow opportunities to listen to the thinking of every teacher within their department. And at this time, I'm going to pause and recognize the 4 curriculum specialists for their efforts to lead this work. I'm going to have you wave. I've got 3 of the 4 here this evening. Julie Vasquez for World Languages, Lisa Zerbel for Social Studies, and Jonna Wallace for ELA Secondary. And Diane Murphy is at home. She's got another meeting tomorrow night, and she'll join us at the podium in April. Yay. As I mentioned earlier, many conversations have happened within each committee. Persons can follow the work on our district website and view every agenda, every document, all the resources that have been shared. If you go to employees and then active district committees and click on the magnifying glass icon, all 4 committees' work is represented there. Based on their work thus far, we've tried to capture the gaps and needs identified by each committee in a series of slides in the following parts of this presentation. As we begin, it's important to note that all 3 committees at the secondary level revealed no major gaps in materials, but each committee did identify a handful of important items for consideration. Also, all 4 committees identified access to computer carts or Chromebooks as important moving forward as devices to allow students and teachers to access open source or other digital resources. That's key. So let's start with our World Language Committee. Our current reality in world languages includes that the hard copy student and teacher editions of our current text will remain in our possession, and we will continue to use these resources to support instruction in all world language courses. We're losing access to MyHRW, which is one online part of our adopted materials, but we will have flash drives with the bulk of the teacher resources available in this format moving forward. And this morning, Tom Clark informed us that he can better organize that so it doesn't have to be on a flash drive and is better accessible for our teachers. We will continue to have access to Class Zone, which includes free online resources and practice materials, which is important to our teachers. One big change not identified as a gap by this committee, but as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, resources that will be missed by some of our teachers in world languages include that we can't any longer purchase consumable workbooks in areas where we have a text for each student, as we simply don't have the capital override dollars to fund supplementary materials where we have a text moving forward. Other districts have had to make this hard call, and it's not just an SUSD issue. Based on this reality and the work of our World Language Committee, we tried to capture a comprehensive list of gaps or needs they've identified on the next slide. First, depending on enrollment, we may have an insufficient number of current texts for students for next year. This committee also identified a need for a more robust curriculum that is rooted in standards, not just based on the scope and sequence of our textbooks. Additional needs identified by this committee include more web resources, engaging in up-to-date videos, readings, and listening activities for our students, and units of study intended to build proficiency in the 3 modes of communication embedded in a cultural context that's important to our world language teachers. This committee also identified a need to have fewer students in their classrooms, to allow our teachers to structure their classrooms in a way that allows students to engage more in speaking activities. And they identified additional professional development to allow our teachers to continue to learn more about ways of teaching to meet the needs of 21st century language learners as essential as well. Recommendations from this committee about how to best fill the identified gaps include that as a first priority, we need to provide enough copies of the current text so every student has access to a world language text in the following years. The second most important recommendation from this committee involved that they have requested we try to embed more PLC time for them to work together to develop units of study embedded within their school day. A related recommendation includes a request to coordinate opportunities for teachers to be paid to work together in the summer to further develop units of study, create more detailed curriculum maps, and continue to explore and identify online resources to support teaching and learning in world languages. I just want to share that this idea of bringing teachers together to collaborate and work on organizing resources into units that allow our teachers to easily access those was identified by some persons in all 4 committees. And we have plans to do that in all those areas this summer during the first 2 weeks after school. Julie Vasquez is organizing what that work will look like for our world language teachers this summer. I'm going to go back just for a second. To try to provide some clarity in the recommendations to address gaps, slides in this presentation, I've highlighted things in red that have been prioritized by each group that may have capital override dollars attached to them. And we'll bring them back in April to the next board meeting as another informational item after determining specific dollar amounts, if any, associated with any of these items in the presentation. So those popped in red likely have a capital override dollar attached to them, associated with them moving forward. The current reality for our Social Studies Committee includes that at this time, each student has access to a hard copy of our textbook, but if we refer back to the capital override cycle, these books are some of the oldest in Scottsdale at this time, and they're showing the most wear. So we will need to allocate some capital override dollars for the rebinding of these books that warrant that this summer. Other realities specific to social studies includes that the hard copy students and teacher editions that we currently have access to will remain in our possession, and our teachers will continue to use these to support instruction of the curriculum. Like world languages, we will no longer have access to McDougall-Littell published online materials, but we still have access to the Glencoe published materials. Like world languages, some of the teacher resources previously available online are on a flash drive that is available to our social studies teachers moving forward. It's important to note that some of our social studies materials are so dated they didn't come with any online materials to begin with, as in the case of some of our resources that support econ. Other important context includes that we have a handful of very important resources available to teachers and students highlighted on our SUSD library web pages. Those specific to social studies include the items highlighted on yellow on the screen in front of you. The U.S. History and Context and World History and Context are free, open source Gale resources provided by the Arizona State Library Database. They are digital resources that provide reference materials, images, academic articles, news, magazines, and some audios. They are fantastic resources, but they do not include assessments or test builders, and those resources continue to be identified as important to our teachers. Other considerations specific to social studies include that open source materials and flex books continue to emerge almost daily. Just recently, we learned of a big history free open source resource, and we have a handful of teachers participating in the learning about that this spring. That's a small partnership in SUSD, but one I think we're going to want to pay attention to, because I think we'll see more opportunities for our teachers with that moving forward. And as a final piece to the reality of our social studies teachers, these members on this committee are monitoring the new mandate specifics to the civics tests that will be required of our students to graduate. And there will be recommendations for instruction and implementation that come with that. Based on that reality, this committee examined all of our materials and identified the following as needs and gaps. Like world languages, based on enrollment, we may be deficient in the number of text available to our students. And this group also identified a need for additional web sources, open sources, supplementary resources, and units of study to update our curriculum and provide our teachers with easy access to support their instruction of the social studies standards specific to each course. Our Social Studies Committee also identified access to more technology devices in the classroom level as a significant need moving forward, as well as repairing or replacing any infrastructure that is slow or in need of attention to ensure access to web-based resources. So recommendations from this committee on how to best address those gaps include just like our World Language Committee. Most important is to ensure we have enough copies of our current student editions so every student has a book in social studies in every course across SUSD moving forward. Also consistent with our World Language Group, our Social Studies Committee is recommending that we continue to coordinate opportunities for teachers to get together, to locate online sources, update units of study to include these resources, and further develop curriculum maps. As an aside, our social studies teaching and learning coach, Lisa Zerbel, has organized a system in Google for unit development, and teachers have been submitting items and resources into those units throughout the year. And as I mentioned earlier, we plan to continue that work in the summer. Items prioritized from this group that may require capital override dollars are again noted in red, and we'll continue to tease out what those look like, how they're prioritized, and how much they cost so we can present exact dollar amounts for you at our April board meeting. Okay, let's move into ELA. We just have one left because the K-5 one is short. Our current context in ELA includes that our teachers, again, will still have access to our current resources that we have, including our anthologies, but we will lose online access to our high school resources moving forward. Looking through the gap analysis completed by each of our 5 high schools, there were no areas where all 5 high schools identified that they were deficient in instructional materials. However, a couple items were identified specific by individual sites. 2 sites indicated they believe they didn't have quite enough materials to support teaching and learning of Greek and Latin roots, and 1 campus shared that they're in need of resources to support different levels of thinking at various depths of knowledge. Within the conversations of this committee and those that have been generated by our JANA, some of our teachers shared resources they are using to address both of these needs, and JANA is prioritizing these topics during our Summer PD Institute to allow interested teachers to organize and share their resources in a Google site, so all teachers have access to those materials. Though our gap analysis at grades 9 through 12 did not reveal major gaps in materials or resources, it did reveal a few items that all sites to believe important to have access to moving forward. The top 3 items prioritized for this group include providing all teachers at the high school level, not just ELA teachers, with access to a product that prevents plagiarism, verifies content, and evaluates written work completed by our students. Access to additional novel sets was identified as a second priority, and more access to nonfiction literary materials emerged as the 3rd priority from this committee. Additional items identified for consideration include extending our online licenses with our current adopted materials for additional years. 3 of the 5 of our sites have some teachers that would like to see that extended. So while in social studies we don't even have the option to continue the online access because it doesn't exist anymore, in ELA we would. The licenses are still there. We would just have to extend them annually if we prioritize and agree to move forward with that recommendation. Additional resources to support our AP classes was identified as another potential area. Test prep materials, supplementary resources to support a variety of areas, and grade-level instructional units of study created by SUSD teachers also emerged as a need or a gap. As is consistent with our World Language and Social Studies committees, some of our ELA committee members are interested in working together this summer to continue these conversations, focusing on revising our curriculum maps and further developing our units. We're planning to allow those interested to take part in that this summer as well. Again, the items prioritized as most important and that may involve capital override dollars are highlighted in red, and we'll bring those back with titles in April after our department chairs have had an opportunity to work with JANA and identify novel titles of interest and those in line with the Lexile levels expected of students in grades 9 through 12. It's important to kind of tease that out a little bit. We have some sites that believe they have enough novels, and there are other sites that believe we're deficit. So that's where that emerged. Equity was part of the conversation in our English language arts secondary group. Our last little group. Our 4th and final committee this year is our K-5 ELA committee with support to social studies. This committee, which includes 3 elementary principals, assistant principals, has clocked well over 25 hours together thus far this year. They've been analyzing our SUS data specific to Ames, Stanford 10, and end-of-year data from ATI. They've been studying the publisher's criteria documents for K2 and 3.5. They've been reviewing the instructional content frameworks and really investigating best practice research specific to teaching elementary language arts. Based on the needs identified by our gap analysis at the elementary level, two distinct areas are emerging as significant with this group. At the K-2 level, this committee identified foundational skills, or phonics, as a need to address. And at the 3-5 level, the gap analysis indicated a possible need for additional resources to support reading and writing. This committee is still meeting, and we'll be making final recommendations to present to the board in the next couple of weeks, and we'll bring those back to you as a separate informational item at the April board meeting. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share the progress and huge work of 4 instructional materials review committees that have been meeting this year. As we've been referring to throughout this presentation, our next steps include that our curriculum specialists are working with committee members and department chairs and lead teachers to finalize those recommendations. And Kay Stockley has begun to work her magic, identifying the dollars associated with these priorities as fiscally responsibly as possible. And has been indicated through this presentation, we'll bring these items back to you as an informational item in April. Other next steps include that the curriculum team members will continue to identify resources and facilitate the development of units of study in these content areas, including interested teachers in the work interested teachers in this work this summer. And finally, equally important to this conversation and a next step includes that the district will need to consider means for instructional materials typically purchased by capital override moving forward, especially technology resources that allow students access to quality digital resources and our teachers access to teach them to develop as 21st century learners. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss and celebrate what's important, what we value, and what we're committed to doing in all things curriculum in Scottsdale. Once again, I want to thank the teachers and the principals and the curriculum specialists, district admins that have invested so much time and energy to these committees to ensure we do right by kids and our taxpayers with the remaining dollars we have allocated to us in our highly coveted capital override budget. And with that, I'm happy to entertain your questions or requests for information you'd like to see in our April informational updates.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. I don't know about you, but I'm tired.
Me too. They are too.
That was a great, every time you present, I just feel exhausted. So thank you for all the work.
I don't think that's a good thing.
No, because it was so much work. And you summed it up very well. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a few brief questions, and it's where you get into the needs, the gaps, the recommendations, and my questions apply to all. First is, as they're presented on the slide, are they in the order of priority that the committees came up with?
No, and that's Madam President and Governing Board Member Kirby. That's a great question. They are in the narratives that I provided. I often said these are the top 3 priorities, but as the summaries emerged, they were not prioritized from most important to least important. But when we bring them back to you in April, they will be.
Okay, that'd be helpful.
Priorities
and then you also were going
allocate.
to put the costs next
Exactly.
to them if there are any. Okay, that's going to be very helpful. And then when there's references in here to give time to explore, to learn to use design lessons, does that give time to teachers?
Correct.
So is there any thought to how we're going to give that time?
Madam President, Board Member Kirby, yeah.
Okay.
2 things emerged, 2 kinds of time emerged in these conversations. Try to embed more time during the school day emerged clearly from our world language group as a huge priority, but all of the groups identified a need to compensate teachers for the time that we spend in this work in the summer. So while we do the PD Institute and we don't compensate for that, and we allocate PD hours, which is a very relevant conversation to that context of horizontal move that you've had earlier this evening, we have a few dollars carryover in Title II intended for professional development that we believe we can allocate for all 4 committees at $25 an hour to bring them together for at least a few days per committee for those interested in doing this work. It's a tip of the hat. $25 an hour doesn't do a lot, but it's one that we want to prioritize with the carryover dollars. We want to give it all back to our teachers.
Okay, so in April, can you just flesh that out a little bit more? And then another question that I had, and this is totally my lack of understanding and my naivety, but when we pay teachers to come in the summer to do this work, if we do that, I need to have a better understanding of the teacher's role in that effort versus a department chair's role versus the curriculum specialist's role. And maybe it's beyond just the summer. Maybe it's in the summer and then also the rest of the school year as it pertains to the work done in the summer, because I'm really unclear.
And that's a great follow-up question to your previous question, in that we can do a better job of identifying the different roles and the various roles that we play. But if I'm being honest, the only two areas that we've had many dollars to allocate to pay teachers in the summer have been ELA and math, because we could affiliate that and associate with former Race to the Top dollars. It had to be allocated towards that. The other areas of what we've been able to compensate have been in the partnerships we have with AMP, with Scottsdale Community College, and with ASU for our math pathways teachers. There's compensation that comes with those grants as well, which has been huge. And there's a compensation for the first time ever with social studies for that big history opportunity I discussed earlier too, but they're very rare outside of math and ELA. This is the first time that I can remember since working in this position that we've been able to allocate dollars to other committees doing this work based on Title II carryover.
Okay, so it's the dollars as well as
the roles.
The roles and responsibilities related to this work.
Okay, we'll tease that out.
And maybe, yeah, because it may be just a process clarification for me. I'm just very unclear. Department chairs, how did they come into play, if at all? You don't have to answer it now. We can talk about it in April.
And we have the work, we're a little bit ahead in elementary ELA. We've allocated more time and resources to that. So we'll kind of show you what unit development looks like, because they're more advanced in our April presentation with ELA.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation.
Mrs. Perleberg.
Make sure I have this on. Okay. Thank you. As someone who typed their senior research paper on a typewriter, I can't imagine the changes that are happening in curriculum, in where we get our information and the resources out there, but it almost has to seem overwhelming, so that it's actually difficult to find acceptable resources, because there's got to be just so much out there now. It's truly overwhelming, and yes, kudos to everyone on these committees and trying to wrap their arms around this, because I truly can't imagine the process that would have to go into it to make it effective. But I guess that kind of leads to my first question, that it's going to sound sarcastic and maybe a little snarky, but it truly is sincere, because I'm putting myself in this situation as well. I'm trying to understand the role of parents in the committee and what exactly they would bring to the table and to the committee. I'm just trying to understand that process a little bit. And
Madam President, Board Member Perleberg, that's a great question. And in reviewing, in preparation for the 4 committees this year, spent a lot of time reviewing what outside recommendations are about the role of all committee members. And I think it's interesting that most persons doing adoption work recommend that we have one parent for exactly kind of what I think you're alluding to. The biggest role of a parent on this kind of committee is to represent the voices of other parents and make sure we're looking through the lens of parents, but also to serve as the help in the communication back to parent councils and other parent groups. We allow or encourage up to 5, one from every learning community, so between 1 and 5 parents on this kind of group. And I'll be honest, they're rock stars. They attend everything. They bring their perspectives and they reach out to their community members and their parent groups to bring back their feedback based on the conversations we're having. But I have been involved in some committee work, especially in math, where some of the parents got to the advanced stages where we were looking at materials that said, hey, appreciate that you've let us be a part of this, but we're going to leave this up to the content experts. Good luck. We love you. Let us know how it turns out. And while that's been fun, and I think that's respectful too. So we're very grateful for the role of our parents, but it's a purposeful role in providing communication and making sure we're looking through the lens and hearing from our parents and their concerns about that they have heard from certain content areas as well.
Okay. Well, that I guess, thank you for that. I think I can understand that role a little bit better. Or, I mean, it's a lot to take on for a parent, honestly, to be that parental voice when all you know really are your kids and your teachers and your school and those types of things. But I think it is great. So I'm going to incorporate that idea into kind of my next question, and that is, in this process, is there something formal? Again, I can't imagine all the work here that you can't summarize in these things. So I'm trying to understand, and if there's any sort of formal process that brings into the committee work either recognized or identified best practices within our own classrooms and at our own schools, and we bring in those examples, those specific materials being used, or those curriculum that's been identified successful. And again, I'm all about differentiation and different classroom in different places looking different. So it's not a matter of, oh, this one thing works, so everybody's got to do it. Just trying to understand how it gets incorporated into kind of a formal process where when all the dust settles, there are those tools available to teachers that they even can kind of recognize from their own sites or their own classrooms. And I guess that would be a question then for that parent role as well. Is there a formal process where they have something tangible to take back to their PTOs or take back to the SPC for that presentation to PTO presidents? How formalized are those items? So I guess that's one question.
Great questions, Board Member Perlberg. We do have on the websites that we follow people can follow the progress of our committees. There are resources and tools to help our parent groups or our teacher groups follow the conversations that are happening and help in communication with the constituents that they're supporting back at their site. So they could take the agendas and say, these are the 3 things that we talked about. And the agenda is very structured that way. In terms of a formal process for embedding the successes of our teachers, I think one of the most important parts of any committee work is we start with our successes and acknowledge the great things that are happening with those that are around the table and listen to their stories. So when we identify time and energy and provide resources about best practices to embed conversations about what we're already doing, that's part of the slide about what are we already doing. We presented this is where materials, resources, and instruction used to look like. I should have provided that document too so you could see where the intended goals of where we want to be to support 21st century learning and thinking. And right out of the chute, we asked our teachers and department chairs at a department chair meeting, take a look at what are we already doing that's great. Share those stories around the table, because there are places, every teacher's got something to celebrate, and every teacher could identify with something on that sheet, and then to identify what are our steps so we can have more of us moving over in more of the areas. So we embed the time for the stories and for persons to share their experience in those kinds of settings. And we try to develop those kind of settings and learning opportunities in our early releases too. We only get 2 of them. But we have, you've seen our choices. We have up to 100 choices sometimes for our teachers based on the fact that we have different teachers facilitating learning sessions that have emerged as rock stars. And that's a really important of a learning that happens on those dates.
I would agree. The theme I constantly hear from teachers, one is, yes, we have to compensate the expertise that is in our district, and we have to respect and recognize the value, the all-important roles that they play in education, but also the idea of them working together and how important that is. How much they want it in their daily work, and it's not of like, oh, I should be working with my colleagues more, I guess. They want it so badly, and to prioritize that, and even to find digital ways for us to do that, for our teachers to do that and share those anecdotes and the stories that go around a circle. I applaud Google and all those wonderful things that I'm hearing allow our teachers to do that and share. So thank you all. Look forward to hearing more.
Mr. Jackson.
Dr. Benson, I wanted to thank you for an incredible presentation. I agree with Board Member Kirby. It's a bit exhausting.
I agree too.
Yeah.
I know. I apologize.
No need.
You're like thankful at the minute, right?
Yeah. A lot of material to cover, and the amount of I'll just be quick. The amount of work that went into this process. What a thoughtful, transparent process this committee has engaged in. Makes me proud as a board member, and gives me a lot of solace as a parent that. That's how things are conducted in this school district, which is, I think, why we are so successful. So thank you for, and all the committee members, for this incredible amount of work. Truly impressive. And Anyway, thank you. That's it.
I appreciate that. I'm proud of our committee members, too.
Mrs. Hartman?
Thank you, President Snead. Dr. Benson, wow, that was really impressive. Thank you so much for that thoughtful, as Board Member Jackson said, thoughtful, inclusive process. And it really seems as though your results are not only fiscally responsible but innovative. So thanks so much. It really does. It seems this process would seem to me to be great content for an editorial on what curriculum development, local curriculum development looks like, since that's very much a misnomer in our community. But one quick question for you on the on the related instructional material items. For example, I heard you mention the need for more Chromebooks, fewer students per classroom, additional professional development, including the 21st century learner context. Are those all going to be included as line items as what those, they may not make the top of the list, but are they still going to be itemized out so we can identify what they all look like and what the recommendations or desires are?
It's a great question, Ms. Hartman. We can do that. Some of those won't have dollars associated with them. When we get requests from our teachers for professional development, we immediately embed those into our PD Institute and into our early releases next year, because we try to hit the needs of our teachers as best we can. So we may offer the payment for our teachers, we'll put that part in as a line item. But we'll go as far down the list as we can outside of the three priorities that you've identified. One area where we're going to need help, where this budget will go bust, is laptop carts and Chromebooks are expensive, and that's identified as something that the bulk of our teachers really want. And so we'll put together what that looks like for ELA, say at a grade level, and by content area, and let you take a look at that. But that's an area where we will need more help. Our capital override dollars will not allow us to sustain that in all areas, to purchase and sustain. So we will do that by area, by line item, as best we can moving forward in April.
All right, that would be terrific. As a board, hopefully we can be creative and maybe think of some creative solutions to support our teachers outside of the lack of capital dollars that we actually get to support these efforts. So thank you for the extra time on that as well.
Appreciate that.
Mrs. Kirby, I still see request to speak.
Thank you. I had a follow-up thought. It's not a question, just something for the committee and staff to consider. And you said this, but I didn't really connect the dots in my head until I was listening to Board Member Perleberg talk. With respect to paying teachers to do this work in the summer, I will admit up front, I don't have a very clear understanding of what that work is. But I'm wondering, and this is what you did say that just clicked with me, if we paid the teachers their horizontal movement, because they are doing work that's more professional development. And we reduced their class sizes with the override, and we gave them a 2%. I'm wondering how much of that pay teachers for this work is just yet another cry for my pay needs to be addressed. And if we did the horizontal movement and we did the 2% and we reduced the class sizes, and if we took the inflation funding, that we might be able to avoid, paying for this and paying for that, and no disrespect to teachers, but almost being nickel and dimed. And I mean that not in a negative way. Quite frankly, I don't blame teachers for wanting to be paid for all the time that they put in on their own time, because I know teachers go way above and beyond. So it's just, as you do your prioritization and your costs, it doesn't have to be all incremental, is my point. If we do some of the other, if we pay over here, then maybe we don't have to pay over here.
And Madam President and Board Member Kirby, part of the issue, and I understand that and I feel it, is these are Title II dollars that have those very specific areas where we can only spend it. That's why it's paid out that way, because it can only be spent for that PD for those areas. So sometimes it does feel like nickel and diming. In reality, it is, because of the restrictions that come with those dollars.
And to piggyback on that, we used to be able to allow our teachers to choose PD hours or payment for certain things years ago, almost 10 years ago, when we were doing lots of PD work in the district, because horizontal movement was so significant to our teachers that many would deny, say they don't want to be paid by the hour, and take the PD because that would move them over on the next air and career ladder as well. So those days, as we froze PD and career ladder went away, it's become more significant, as you've suggested, Board Member Kirby, that people are asking, hey, I'd sure like to be acknowledged for the work we're putting in for this hard work.
Title $2.
Title $2.
Specific to this request, yes.
What does that mean, specific to this request?
There are other, like when we talked about the monies available through NSF, through our pathways, that's not Title II, that's connected to the grant we have with ASU and our National Science Foundation, and SCC, the same kind of partnership as well. But this specific opportunity, in conjunction with our 4 areas, it's because we have a little Title II carryover that we didn't anticipate, a few thousands of dollars that we wanted to allocate right back to our teachers. It's intended for professional development, supporting the learning of how to teach the content standards, and that work will be important as they identify resources to better support them. It's a perfect fit for that.
If we paid the horizontal movement and 2% salary increase and reduced the class sizes and maybe even the inflation funding, would there be any other possible areas where we could use the Title II dollars besides this one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Lots of fun areas that we could use.
Oh, I just wanted to thank you as one of those parents that I was on a middle school social studies curriculum adoption way back when, and
bless you.
Also the fine arts as well. Yes, it's a very long process, but having participated in it, I saw the advancements over the years in being able to have differentiation presented to the teachers with cliques and with assessment building and that sort of thing that are embedded within the curriculum. And that's something that's kind of hard to explain to people and explain to parents if you haven't had to write lesson plans or haven't seen how much thought goes into it. That being said, the benefit of having all of this online instruction is that it can be up to date,
correct,
that it's easier to differentiate, that it's easier to create assessments. On the other hand, my fear is that it also ties us into less, it restricts us as to adoption renewals, because we're now tied to licenses rather than physical books, where we used to be able to say, we'll just keep this book for a little bit longer. We should have renewed it at 7 years, but we're going to stretch it out till 10. Is there that kind of an electronic impact to the way that you have to do business now?
Madam President, great question, and Kay Stockley is still with us here this evening. When we negotiate the agreements, they're not contracts, but when we negotiate agreements, even with an online resource, like let's take our most recent very stellar science materials, Discovery Ed Textbook and Discovery Ed Streaming. We get up-to-date materials as they become available, but we have a 7-year agreement with them as well. So it's very consistent with how we do hard copy textbooks. Where it becomes a little bit concerning is if we go after an open source material that becomes something that persons want to charge us for later. So while there's a plethora of great stuff out there, that's what we'll have to be mindful of moving forward, because when we use an open source material, we don't have an agreement with that vendor because we're not paying them anything for 7 years. So that's the kind of work. Okay. And I appreciate, I'm going back to some of the comments that were made earlier in the board comments, how difficult this work is and how much there is that's available. The vetting of resources and the work of the curriculum specialist to identify those that are most significant to our teachers is huge. Could be a full-time job just to be paying attention to what resources are and identifying them in the top 3 to 5 and getting them out to our teachers so that they don't have to spend all the time and energy vetting them on their own. Big, huge piece of our work. We feel pretty comfortable with the digital resources and licenses and the agreements that we have, but the open source ones are going to be something that we want to monitor moving forward. Great question.
Thank you. And I just have one other comment that I'd like to bring up every once in a while, and this is a perfect time. A lot of times education is compared unfavorably to business. And what I like to remind people is that, yes, sometimes we move more slowly, but we rely on volunteers, basically. Either the teachers to volunteer their time, our administrators to work in the evenings, our parents to volunteer their time, and from all of the other districts that I know, Scottsdale is the most inclusive, the most open about it, and I just, knowing what goes into it, I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for doing all of that. None of these kind of committees can work without people willing to volunteer. And honestly, a lot of times the people that do volunteer are the ones who are least satisfied with the status quo. And so we need to recognize that that's part of that process as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to item 9C, process for the sale of the Education Center building and land.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Our CFO, Dan O'Brien, is going to present some bullet points as to the process and where we are in trying to move forward with the sale of the Education Center.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson, Sandra, good evening again. Real quickly, it was requested to put together some steps and try to put together a timeline of the process that we are going to use for the sale of the Education Center. So what I've done is created some bullet points here, and I'll kind of speak a little bit about why we cannot have some hard dates on this, or that it's more of just an open-ended timeline. Here you'll see that we have started the process. In our February board meeting, the board did approve for us to issue a RFP for brokerage services. We are ready to put that out on the street. After we put that out on the street and it's evaluated, then the recommendation will come to the governing board again to approve the awarded vendor for the RFP. We will then, after the board approval, we will hire the vendor for the brokerage services based off of your approval. We will then work with the brokerage service and ourselves in the district to work to find a potential buyer for the property. And I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but in looking at the best way to sell the Education Center, it's really going to be a collaborative effort, and there's a few reasons why, and we'll get into those. So we will work together to find a potential buyer, reminding ourselves that the buyer we need to get full market value for that property. We need to determine exactly what that is, and then get that from whatever buyer is found. Work with the buyer and the broker to have the property rezoned for buyer's purpose. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Currently, right now, the Education Center is zoned what's called an S zone, which basically means that it's zoned by the City of Phoenix to be used for the purpose of school business, government business, or church business. And so to try to sell it for a residential or commercial purpose, we have to have it rezoned. And rezoning is a very difficult and time-consuming process. So we need to work with the buyer to determine what they want to use the property for, and then we have to work through several channels. In the City of Phoenix, one of the biggest, the first channel is to determine what the purpose is and what it's going to be zoned. And then we go through what's called the neighborhood planning committees, and then up through to the City of Phoenix and eventually to the City Council. In doing that, when you go through that, we can't just go in and say we're going to sell it commercial and hey, thanks, approve it. If you've ever been to one of those committees, or you know anybody who's sat on one of those committees, they are a very detailed committee. They want to know who the buyer is. They want to have sketches of what it's going to look like. They want to know what the landscape's going to be. They want to know a lot of detail about what it is for several reasons. One, to make sure it's in the entire City of Phoenix's master plan, but also that it's in what they believe their neighborhood should be doing with that property and looking like. So that is going to probably be the longest process within this. And I say long, I'm not going to I can't really really put a time frame on it, but I can tell you it's not 6 to 8 weeks. It's 6 to 8 months to a year to get through that process fully, depending on how many times we have to go back and stuff. So very, very, and that's why really for me to say, oh, we'll have this done by September would not be valid to anybody because of that process. So I want to make sure we know that. Once we do that, we will complete the property with governing board approval, the sale of the property for governing board approval. So we'll bring it back once we get through that entire process. We will, I don't believe we will just come back at that time. I believe updates will be given throughout the process so that the governing board is knowledgeable about where we are in those steps as the months come along, so that we make sure that you guys are aware. Once the sale happens, those funds are deposited into Fund 506, which is School Plant Fund. Those funds inside 506, after a couple of items have to be looked at, such as our debt service, some of our percentages, which we've done with bond counsel, those funds can be used for capital and major repairs, which again, in prior board meetings, we have discussed that when we sell the Ed Center, we'll be using those dollars for school sites that have major repairs, and we'll be working with Terry and Building Services to get that, or it can be used for reducing debt service. Again, as discussed with the board previously, we will be using these funds for site capital and major repairs needed. And again, when we talk about major repairs, we're not talking about changing out a light bulb. We're not talking about fixing an outlet. We're talking about replacing compressors, replacing ACs, replacing roofs, fixing major areas that improve the value of the building. And so a lot of that will be done. We'll work through a plan with Building Services on how to do that.
Thank you. Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. You're right. This does very long process, and it's a good thing you're not doing this in Paradise Valley because it would take you at least 2 years. But if a church or school or if the city decided that they wanted that property, then it just sells. It doesn't have to be rezoned, so we don't have that 12 to 18 month committee hearing. It can move much faster, correct?
Board Member Kirby, Madam President, yes and no. Yes, if the sale is just we're selling the building. If we find a church or city that wants to use it and determines that they need to tear it down and rebuild it, then I believe, not sure, we will go through that process, but I believe then, no, they would probably make it contingent upon getting through that development process. So it's a yes and no answer.
It would go faster, though. It definitely would go. They probably would still have to look at heights and density and all that.
Definitely would go faster.
So, 2 questions. Will all offers be brought to the board?
Board Member Kirby, Madam President, if that's a request of the board, we can definitely do that, or we can bring the highest or the best negotiated with the broker. But that will be a board request, and I will bring back anything that the board requests.
Okay, I'd like to see all offers. And then last question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to get it out there just in case this happens. If let's say there was I'll think of a real life situation. Let's say there was a drug rehab that wanted to buy that property and put up a drug rehabilitation center there. That is between the city and the drug. If they make a market offer and we accept it, then whether or not that drug rehab goes right there in that neighborhood next to a high school and next to a residential community is up to the city and the applicant. We're out of it, correct? Or incorrect?
Board Member Kirby, Madam President, I'm going to give you a yes/no question, yes/no answer again. If we had fair market value, and got through the community, if we got fair market value, and the buyer did not request for us to assist through the rezoning process, then yes. I don't know if we'll find a buyer that does that. I think any buyer commercially will want for us to assist through that rezoning process. So could it happen? Yes. I don't believe, in talking to some of the consultants and talking to some people who have called and some of the city zoning officials, it will probably be a joint venture of all three of us, the buyer, ourselves, and the broker, to get through that rezoning process.
Okay, so given that we're a school district, and I can't think of a better example. I'm tired. I can't think of a better example right now than drug rehab. But could we legally deny to assist something that we didn't necessarily want right next to our high school?
Board Member Kirby, Madam President, and Ms. Marshall, you're more than happy to jump in here, but I think I'm gonna be okay here real quick. That is one of the reasons why we decided to do a brokerage service instead of just a straight real estate sale, is because then we can do a venting process with the buyers to ensure that we're being responsible sellers and responsible to the community and what we believe that we should do with that property. And of course, remember, we still have Arcadia High School sitting right next to that.
Right.
So I would believe that although maybe legally we can't do it, I think through the RFP process and the brokerage process and the venting process of any buyer, that we will be able to do that as good citizens and stewardships of that property.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions. And yeah, I think I would like to see the offers that come in.
Madam
They're reasonable. I mean, I don't want to see any low balls.
Madam President, Board Member Curry, part of the issue is going to be if the offers have contingencies on them. So if the example you used, I would imagine they would probably want a contingency put on it to get approval. I don't think that's what we'd want to consider. If somebody else came to us and said, we want to move ahead in a different area because of the risks involved. But that's something the board will have to weigh based on those offers that come to us.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Danny. I guess just to mirror on what Board Member Kirby said, this probably goes without saying, but I'm more concerned. Obviously, we need to get the highest price to be good stewards of district property, but I'm more concerned about the end use of that property, frankly, more than getting the absolute top dollar. We want the right end user next to our Arcadia High School. That's critically important, obviously. So I think that's kind of where Board Member Kirby is going. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Board Member Jackson, Madam President, again, Michelle can correct me when I'm wrong if she needs to come up here and get me. Although I don't think legally we can deny anybody based off of that. Again, I'll reiterate, as good stewardships of that piece of property, as knowing that it's next to Arcadia High School, I think that Dr. Peterson, myself, and the brokerage firm would be very, very dead set against putting a owner there that would not be viable to the community and to Arcadia High School.
Mrs. Hartman, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just one question for Mr. O'Brien. Do we have a feel for what the value of the property is if it's zoned F versus C?
The value, a feel for the value of the property?
Board Member Hartman, we don't have a value. We are working on gaining a value or an appraisal based off of turning it into a commercial property. In talking to the appraisal, an S zoning is really not worth much in the open market because there's just not a lot of people out there in a good bidding situation or discussion situation for allowing us to get the best possible dollar that we can. So in speaking with the city of Phoenix and Olson Associates, who is helping us with this, turning it into a C zoning instead of continuing with the S, or even turning it into an R zoning, which is residential. The C zoning would be the best and probably highest price that we can place on that property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item 9, an information discussion item. This will be changed to item E, revisions of governing board policies, section B, school board governance.
Madam President, members of the board, let's cap the evening off with some B policies.
I have another idea for a cap, just saying right now.
That sounds pretty good. We're bringing to you recommended revisions to our remaining B policies. Just to give what's remaining of our audience and you a reminder, the board throughout the past year has approved revisions to most of this section's policies. And the last time that you got together and discussed the remaining three was February 5th. You all provided us feedback on board member authority and responsibilities, board member ethics, and school attorney policy. Board members were invited to provide additional feedback to be incorporated in revisions for your consideration. So my office took those, any suggested revisions from you all, and put together a couple of documents. There were no additional revisions requested for board member ethics. The feedback that you provided in February was that you liked all of the language. The only comment I have about that is that ended up in the policy being quite lengthy, but what the feedback that I heard from you that day was that you liked all of the language, so that's what I put in there for you. On school attorney, a couple of revisions were made. Throughout that policy as it was, there were references to both outside counsel and private counsel. We usually use the term outside counsel, so we just made that consistent throughout to be outside counsel. And then we deleted governing board members from the sentence that talks about who has the authority to contact outside counsel. There was some discussion at your meeting before about whether you wanted to do that, how you might want to do that. This was the requested revision. I will tell you that an ethical attorney is going to contact me or the superintendent or the board president to see if they're authorized to be spending money from the district anyway. So that was the suggestion for this one. BBAA, board member authority and responsibilities. The requested revisions include the following, and I just quoted them so that you had all of the language. No board member shall request from the superintendent any staff project that entails over 2 hours of staff work without seeking board approval. The rule pertains only to an individual research request by an individual board member. The next requested revision to this policy was the superintendent's responses to such requests shall be provided to all board members. If an individual board member directly requests information of a staff member, the board member shall copy the superintendent on such requests. That's one of those things that we kind of try to do as a best practice. We sometimes fall out of the habit, but it really is one of those things we try to do anyway. And then the final requested revision to this policy was the following. In the spirit of transparency and good governance, board members shall not text, email, or otherwise engage in electronic communication during board meetings, which includes executive session, except to access information stored on the device or the district's electronic network. Board members will conduct all electronic communications regarding district business through district email accounts. A note about that last sentence, again, that's kind of a best practice when it comes to public records requests. If we're using our personal emails, it just subjects our personal emails to search for public records. So that's one of those best practices that we encourage anyway. And I believe that the first part of that mirrors something that the city of Scottsdale recently discussed doing in terms of not texting and emailing during meetings. And with that, discussion, questions?
Mrs. Kirby.
I have one question. There is a policy that we were all supposed to get back to you on, and it's not one of these, but it was a new one, and I just realized I hadn't done that yet.
And I'm not remembering off the top of my head which one that was.
Was that the one about governing board members can't sign contracts? Is that the one that you're thinking of?
Was it ethics?
And board member ethics was the one that I referred to, I think, yeah, where the feedback at the February study session was that you liked both the ASBA proposed and what we already had in there.
I think it was the board member review. The board member. Oh, what would help me?
The self-evaluation.
Self-evaluation. Yes, that's right.
And so what I have scheduled
is in April, bringing the proposed evaluation to the board during the study session. Then it will go out as...
okay, so we need to get that in.
And then we'll review the results in May.
And
at
that
a study
one,
session.
Thank you for reminding me. That one, I wasn't expecting feedback from you for this meeting because you needed to have some more discussion about your goals and
okay, good.
measurements.
Thank you. That's the only question I had. Thanks.
Mrs. Hartman, did you have anything you'd like to add?
No comments. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're going to be a little bit of a trailblazer when it comes to school districts with some of this, but I know a lot of the city councils, Peoria, Scottsdale, and school districts outside of Arizona have been embracing these policies. And just because I think transparency and governance has become such a hot topic, and we want to make sure we're at the forefront.
Should we bring these 3 back for consent at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Future items is item number 11. I have, added already the April 9th, the board self-evaluation instrument and process for discussion between the board members. For April 14th, the priorities and costs related to instructional materials review, the ATI discussion, budget discussion. Then in May, board evaluation results. And in May, the district survey process, the third-party survey process. And I think the board members have been given tentative topics for future calendars as well. Is there anything else? This thing keeps timing out. Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. So thanks for the third-party survey. You said in May. Is that study session or the regular meeting?
That is the survey process. Well, we have it at a regular meeting, but it could be done at the study session. I think that would probably be better at the study session, and then if there's anything that we need to vote on, we can bring it back to vote on in May 12th.
I don't see it on either. I don't know if we're looking at the same version, but I'll add it.
Some of those were future items that haven't been put on there.
And then the only other thing that as a reminder, back to our district goals, and this doesn't actually have to be in a board meeting, but just the math, the calculations, the math behind the benchmarks of where we are today and what those data sources are. Have we gotten those yet?
I thought I saw that on here.
We'll verify.
The benchmarking. Oh, that's.
No, it was requested a while back when those were adopted.
And I may have missed them, but it's possible that I missed. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
President Sneed, may I request to speak?
Yes, Ms. Hartman, please.
Thank you. In April or May study session, do we want to have Dr. Peterson just present the strategic planning process, just an update on that? Did we speak about that already?
We have it scheduled tentatively for June 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Input from site leaders on strategic planning. Is that what you were referring to, Ms. Hartman?
Actually, something slightly different, and maybe Dr. Peterson can speak to this if it's appropriate. But it's just what does the planning process look like? I think we walked away from our last study session talking about we had pieces, and the process, is quite a lengthy process. And what does that look like, just so that we're all on the same page?
Okay. Would that be and I have my notes on here, the site-based, the marketing strategies, facility strategies, and partner strategies?
What date are you looking at?
Well, I have it tentatively for June 4th, but is that the topic that you were referring to, the things that we talked about at the last study session?
Yeah, all those fall under strategic planning, and this is just the process. What does the process look like?
Okay.
Of which one step is the June 4th input from the site leaders on strategic planning.
Okay, and we'll figure out, is June 4th sufficient, or did you need it sooner?
I didn't need it sooner. This was really just an opportunity for Dr. Peterson to describe what the process looks like.
Okay.
But if June is the first opportunity to do that, we can do that. I just thought we were going to put a shorter just snapshot of what the process looked like before we dove into the whole process.
Oh, we can arrange that, and that could probably be done at the April 9th meeting as well.
Okay, I'm not trying to rush the process. I just wanted to offer that as a follow-up item.
So at this point, you're looking for a strategic planning process overview.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, dates of upcoming meetings, Thursday, April 9th at noon, Governing Board study session. Where will that be held? Do we know?
At the MDA.
MDA, okay. And let's see if I can make it there without going all the way down to Indian School this time. Tuesday, April 14th, 5 o'clock, the regular Governing Board meeting, which would be in this beautiful room here. Thursday, May 7th at noon, Governing Board study session, MDA as well. And Tuesday, May 12th at 5 o'clock, Governing Board regular meeting. Are there any Governing Board reports? Anything? Okay, and at this time, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Kirby seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mrs. Hartman. Have a safe trip home.
Thank you.